The ice water hit her like a slap across the face, cold, deliberate, humiliating. Emily Carter stood frozen in the middle of Chicago's most exclusive restaurant, drenched and trembling, while champagne glasses clinked and wealthy strangers stared. She wasn't supposed to be here. She was wearing her twin sister's identity like an ill-fitting coat, trapped in a lie she never asked for. But when the billionaire across from her stood up, not with disgust, but with rage that could burn the whole building down, everything changed. This wasn't just dinner anymore. This was the night her entire life would shatter and rebuild itself into something she couldn't possibly imagine. Want to know what happens next? Stay until the end, hit that like button, and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The dress was hideous. Emily stared at herself in the bathroom mirror of her cramped studio apartment, trying to understand how she'd let things get this far. The fabric hung off her shoulders like a deflated garbage bag, some murky brown color that made her skin look sallow under the fluorescent lights. Her twin sister Sabrina had picked it out specifically, of course. Nothing about tonight was an accident. "You look perfect," Sabrina had said 2 hours earlier, circling Emily like a predator evaluating prey. Mousy, forgettable, exactly what I need. Emily had wanted to argue. She'd wanted to say no, to tell Sabrina to handle her own mess for once in her privileged, chaotic life. But then Sabrina had mentioned Rachel's name, sweet, trusting Rachel, Emily's best friend since college, and the trap had snapped shut. "Rachel signed those papers because she trusted you," Sabrina had said, examining her perfect manicure with practiced disinterest. But if certain people found out those investment documents were fake, well, fraud charges don't care about intentions, do they? The worst part was that Rachel had no idea. She'd signed what she thought were legitimate investment forms for a startup that Emily had supposedly vetted. Except Emily had never vetted anything. Sabrina had forged Emily's signature, used Emily's email, constructed an entire scheme using her twin's identity as camouflage. And now Rachel, honest, hardworking Rachel, who volunteered at animal shelters on weekends, was legally liable for financial crimes she didn't commit. "One dinner," Sabrina had promised. "Just show up. Act boring. Let him lose interest. Then I'm done with Damian Whitmore forever and Rachel's paperwork mysteriously disappears. Easy." Nothing about Sabrina's plans was ever easy. Emily checked her phone. 7:47 p.m. The reservation was for 8 o'clock at Luminaire, the kind of restaurant where appetizers cost more than Emily's monthly grocery budget. She'd looked it up earlier, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Chicago River, crystal chandeliers, a wine list that read like a European geography exam. She didn't belong there. But apparently tonight, she was Sabrina Carter, at least for 2 hours. Emily grabbed her coat, her actual coat, not one of Sabrina's designer pieces, and headed out into the October cold. Luminaire smelled like money and orchids. Emily gave the host Sabrina's name, trying to ignore how his eyes swept over her discount dress with barely concealed disdain. He led her through the dining room with the kind of walk that suggested he was doing her an enormous favor, weaving between tables where beautiful people murmured over plates that looked more like art installations than food. And then she saw him. Damian Whitmore sat alone at a corner table, backlit by the city lights beyond the window. He wasn't looking at his phone, wasn't drinking, just sitting there with the stillness of someone who'd learned to be comfortable in his own silence. He wore a dark suit that probably cost more than Emily's car, tailored so precisely it looked like it had been built around him rather than simply purchased. But it was his face that caught her off guard. She'd seen photos, of course. Sabrina had shown her dozens. Screenshots from social media, business profiles, that one magazine cover where he'd been named Chicago's most eligible bachelor. In pictures, Damian Whitmore looked like what he was, a 32-year-old billionaire with sharp features, dark eyes, and the kind of jawline that suggested both privilege and discipline. In person, he looked tired, not physically exhausted exactly. More like someone carrying weight that never got lighter, only more familiar. There were shadows under his eyes that strategic lighting couldn't hide, and when he looked up at her approach, his expression was so carefully neutral it must have taken years to perfect. "Sabrina," he said, standing. His voice was deep, controlled. "You're late." Emily's throat went dry. "Traffic, sorry." He pulled out her chair without comment. The gesture was automatic, polite, completely devoid of warmth. Emily sat down and immediately wanted to disappear into the floor. This was a mistake, A huge, terrible mistake. You changed your hair, Damien said, settling back into his seat. It wasn't a question. Emily's hand went reflexively to her ponytail. Sabrina always wore her hair down, loose waves that cascaded over her shoulders like she'd just stepped out of a shampoo commercial. Emily had forgotten to check. Felt like something different, she managed. The silence stretched between them like taffy. Emily studied the menu, or pretended to, anyway. The prices weren't even listed, which somehow made everything worse. Who ordered food without knowing what it cost? People like Damien Whitmore, apparently. People who'd never had to calculate whether buying pasta meant skipping lunch for 3 days. You're quiet tonight, Damien observed. Am I? Sabrina is many things. Quiet isn't usually one of them. Emily looked up sharply, but his expression remained unreadable. Was that suspicion? Irritation? She couldn't tell. The man gave away nothing. Long day, she said finally. Work was crazy. What kind of work do you do again? The question landed like a test. Emily scrambled mentally. What had Sabrina told him? She was supposed to know this. She should have asked more questions, demanded more details, but Sabrina had been vague about everything except the dress code and the desperate need for Emily to be boring and forgettable. Consulting, Emily tried. It was vague enough to mean anything. For? Different clients. It varies. Damien's eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. Right. A waiter appeared before Emily could dig herself deeper. He was young, polished, with the kind of smile that looked painted on. He took Damien's wine order without writing anything down, then turned to Emily. And for the lady? Water's fine, Emily said. Still or sparkling? Tap is fine. The waiter's smile didn't falter, but something flickered in his eyes. Amusement, maybe. Or contempt. He glided away, and Emily felt Damien's gaze on her face. Tap water at Luminaire, he said quietly. That's a first. Emily's cheeks burned. I'm not that thirsty. Or you're not Sabrina. The words hit the air like a gunshot. Emily's heart stopped, restarted, began hammering against her ribs. She opened her mouth, closed it, had no idea what expression was even on her face anymore. But Damien just leaned back in his chair, studying her with those dark, unreadable eyes. You ordered tap water, he continued, voice still maddeningly calm. Sabrina once sent back a bottle of Pellegrino because it wasn't cold enough. You're wearing a dress that looks like it came from a clearance rack. No offense. And you've said maybe 30 words since you sat down, so either you've had a personality transplant or something else is going on here. Emily's mind raced. Deny it? Confess? Run screaming into the Chicago night? She started. And then the ice water hit her. It happened so fast, Emily didn't even see it coming. 1 second she was trying to form words, the next she was drenched head to toe in freezing water, ice cubes sliding down her dress, her hair plastered to her face, gasping from the shock of it. The restaurant went silent. Emily looked up through dripping bangs to see the same waiter standing over her, holding an empty ice bucket, his expression a perfect mask of theatrical horror. Oh my goodness, he exclaimed, loud enough for every table to hear. I'm so terribly sorry, miss. I don't know what happened. The bucket just slipped. But his eyes told a different story. They were cold, calculated, and briefly, just for a fraction of a second, they flicked toward someone else in the restaurant, following orders. Emily sat frozen, water pooling around her chair, humiliation burning through her chest like acid. People were staring, whispering. A woman at the next table had her phone out, already recording. This was going to be online in minutes. Some titled thing about a disaster date at Luminaire, and Emily's face would be everywhere, immortalized in her ugly dress and dripping hair. What the hell did you just do? Damien's voice cut through the restaurant like a blade. Emily blinked water out of her eyes to see him standing. Not calmly, not politely, but with a fury so controlled it was somehow more frightening than shouting. He moved around the table in 2 strides, positioning himself between Emily and the waiter like a human shield. Sir, I apologize profusely, the waiter started. No. Damien's voice could have frozen the river outside. You don't apologize to me, and you don't insult my intelligence by pretending that was an accident. The waiter's mask cracked slightly. I assure you, who paid you? Silence. I asked you a question, Damien continued, and now his voice dropped even lower, more dangerous. Who paid you? The waiter's throat bobbed. Around them, the restaurant had gone from curious to riveted. This wasn't entertainment anymore. This was a billionaire about to destroy someone's career in real time. Mr. Whitmore, I don't know what you're suggesting. Get the manager, now. The waiter fled. Damien turned to Emily, and the anger in his face immediately shifted into something else. Concern, maybe. Or calculation. She couldn't tell which, couldn't tell anything except that she was sitting in a puddle of ice water in a restaurant full of strangers, and her sister had set her up for public humiliation, and she was so tired of being the person everyone used. Can you stand? Damien asked quietly. Emily nodded, not trusting her voice. He offered his hand. She took it. His palm was warm, steady, and let him pull her to her feet. Water dripped from her dress onto the marble floor. Someone's phone camera flashed. Emily wanted to cry, wanted to scream, wanted to disappear. Instead, Damien did something that short-circuited her entire brain. He shrugged off his suit jacket and wrapped it around her shoulders. It was warm from his body heat, expensive enough that Emily was terrified to touch it with her wet hands, and it smelled like cedar and something else she couldn't identify. The jacket swallowed her. He was broader than he looked, and suddenly she felt less exposed, less like a spectacle. We're leaving, Damien said, not to Emily, but to the universe in general. You don't have to, Emily started. Yes, I do. His hand settled on her lower back, guiding her toward the exit. Emily's brain screamed at her to protest, to explain, to do something other than let this stranger, this billionaire stranger, rescue her from a disaster she didn't even understand. But her body just moved forward, following his lead, grateful beyond words to be escaping the stairs. They were almost to the door when a man in an expensive suit intercepted them. The manager, presumably, with sweat beading on his forehead. Mr. Whitmore, please, if we could just discuss— Send the bill to my office, Damien said without stopping, and fire that waiter. If he's still employed tomorrow, I'll make sure every restaurant in Chicago knows Luminaire hires people to humiliate paying customers. Sir, I'm certain there's been a misunderstanding. There hasn't. And then they were outside, cold October air hitting Emily's wet skin like a slap. She started shivering immediately, violent tremors that rattled her teeth. Damien's jacket helped, but not enough. She was soaked through, freezing, and completely lost. A black car pulled up to the curb, sleek, expensive, with windows tinted dark enough to be illegal. The driver got out, took one look at Emily's dripping form, and opened the back door without a word. Get in, Damien said. Emily hesitated. I should just go home. You're hypothermic. Get in the car. I'm not hypothermic. I'm just cold. Emily. She froze, stared at him. How do you know my name? Damien's expression shifted into something that might have been amusement if it had reached his eyes. You really think I didn't notice you're not Sabrina? I've been on 4 dates with your sister. She wouldn't be caught dead in that dress. She tips exactly 15% because she read it in an etiquette book, and she laughs at her own jokes. You've done none of those things. Emily's mouth opened, closed, opened again. Then why didn't you say anything? Because I wanted to see what game Sabrina was playing this time. He gestured toward the open car door. And because whoever you are, you didn't deserve what just happened. So, get in the car, let my housekeeper find you something dry to wear, and then you can explain why your sister sent you to a date wearing what appears to be a potato sack. Pride told Emily to refuse. Common sense told her to refuse. Every self-preservation instinct she possessed told her to refuse. But she was so cold and so tired, and Damien Whitmore was looking at her like she was a puzzle he actually wanted to solve rather than a problem to be disposed of. Emily got in the car. The Whitmore mansion wasn't a house. It was a statement. Emily pressed her face to the car window as they drove through gates that probably cost more than her entire apartment building, past manicured gardens and fountains that sparkled under strategic lighting. The house itself rose out of the landscape like something from a movie, all glass and stone and architectural ambition, modern but somehow timeless. You live here alone? Emily asked before she could stop herself. No. Damien didn't elaborate. The car stopped under a covered entrance. The driver opened Emily's door, still maintaining the kind of professional silence that suggested he'd seen stranger things than dripping women in ugly dresses. Damien led her inside, through a foyer with ceilings so high Emily's neck hurt looking up, into a living room that could have swallowed her entire apartment twice over. "Wait here," he said, disappearing down a hallway. Emily stood there dripping on marble floors, clutching his jacket around her shoulders, trying to process the last 30 minutes of her life. This wasn't how tonight was supposed to go. She was supposed to show up, bore Damien into ending things with Sabrina, go home, and wait for her sister to destroy the fake documents hanging over Rachel's head. Instead, she was standing in a billionaire's mansion while he, what? Called the police? Called Sabrina? Called his lawyers to sue Emily for identity fraud? "You're shaking." Emily spun around to find a woman standing in the doorway, 50s maybe, with steel gray hair pulled into a neat bun and eyes that looked like they'd seen everything twice. "I'm fine," Emily managed through chattering teeth. "You're hypothermic." The woman moved closer, professional assessment in her gaze. "Mr. Whitmore asked me to help you. I'm Helen, the housekeeper. Come with me." Emily followed her upstairs, down a hallway lined with abstract art that probably cost more than Emily would earn in her lifetime, into a guest room that was bigger than her entire studio. Helen disappeared into the attached bathroom and emerged with towels, a plush robe, and what looked like complete outfit, leggings, a sweater, socks. "These are Claire's," Helen explained, setting the clothes on the bed. "Mr. Whitmore's sister. You're about the same size. Shower, change, warm up. I'll bring you tea." "I don't want to impose." "You're not imposing. You're following orders." Helen's expression softened slightly. "He doesn't bring people here. Ever. So whatever happened tonight, it must have been significant." She left before Emily could respond. The shower was probably a mistake. The moment hot water hit Emily's frozen skin, she started crying. Not delicate tears, ugly, gasping sobs that she muffled against her arm because she didn't know who might hear. Everything just crashed down at once. The humiliation, the fear, the exhaustion of being Sabrina's backup plan, the terror of what might happen to Rachel, and underneath it all the strange, unsettling feeling of being seen. Damien had known, from the moment she sat down, probably before that. He'd known she wasn't Sabrina, and instead of exposing her, embarrassing her, sending her away, he'd protected her. A stranger. Why? Emily stayed in the shower until her skin turned pink and her breathing steadied. Then she dried off, changed into Claire's clothes, which fit perfectly and felt like wearing clouds, and emerged from the bathroom to find a cup of tea waiting on the nightstand. She was halfway through it when someone knocked. "Come in," Emily called, expecting Helen. It was Damien. He'd changed too, jeans and a sweater that made him look younger, less intimidating, more human. He leaned against the doorframe, studying her with those dark eyes that gave away nothing. "Better?" he asked. "Yes, thank you. For everything." "Don't thank me yet. We still need to talk." Emily's stomach dropped. "About? About why Sabrina sent you to that dinner. About who paid that waiter. About what the hell is going on." He pushed off the doorframe. "But first you should eat something. You look like you're about to pass out." "I'm fine. You've said that 3 times now. It's not more convincing with repetition." He gestured toward the door. "Kitchen. Now." Emily wanted to argue, but her stomach betrayed her with an audible growl. Damien's mouth twitched, not quite a smile, but close. "Come on, Emily," he said, and there was something almost gentle in his voice. "Let me feed you before I interrogate you. I'm not a complete monster." Détoile. The kitchen was somehow more intimidating than the rest of the house. Professional-grade appliances, marble countertops that gleamed under pendant lights, a refrigerator that looked like it belonged in a restaurant. Damien moved through it with surprising comfort, pulling out containers, firing up the stove, assembling ingredients like someone who actually knew what he was doing. "You cook?" Emily asked from her perch on a bar stool. "My daughter needs to eat." He cracked eggs into a pan with one hand. Show off. Chefs are fine for formal meals, but she's 6. 6-year-olds want scrambled eggs at midnight and pancakes for dinner. You learn to adapt. Emily's brain stuttered. "You have a daughter?" "Sophie. She's at my mother's house tonight." Something crossed his face. Affection, worry, exhaustion, all tangled together. She lost her mother 3 years ago. Car accident. Since then, it's been me trying to figure out how to raise a kid while running a company and not completely screwing up both. The honesty was so unexpected, Emily didn't know how to respond. This wasn't billionaire Damian Whitmore, the untouchable real estate mogul. This was just a tired dad making eggs. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "About your wife." "Me too." He plated the eggs, perfectly fluffy, seasoned with something that smelled like heaven, and slid them across the counter. "Eat." Emily ate. The eggs were perfect. Of course they were. Damien made his own plate and sat across from her, and for a few minutes they just existed in comfortable silence. No interrogation, no demands, just two people eating scrambled eggs in a kitchen that cost more than most cars. Then Damien set down his fork. "Okay," he said. "Your turn. Start from the beginning." Emily put down her own fork, appetite suddenly gone. "It's complicated. Most things worth explaining are. Sabrina's my twin sister. Identical, obviously. Obviously. She's been dating you for what, a month? 6 weeks, 4 dates, all terrible." Damien's expression remained neutral. "She talks about herself constantly, orders the most expensive thing on every menu, and once spent 20 minutes explaining why her yoga instructor was jealous of her flexibility. I was planning to end it tonight." Emily winced. She knew. That's why she sent me instead. "To what? Make me change my mind?" "To make you lose interest faster." Emily wrapped her hands around her tea mug, needing something to hold. "She told me to wear an ugly dress, act boring, be forgettable. That way when you dumped Sabrina, she could tell people she dumped you first. Pride thing." "That's insane." "That's Sabrina." Emily took a breath. "But that's not the real problem." "There's a real problem beyond identity fraud?" "My best friend Rachel signed some investment documents. She thought they were legitimate, thought I'd vetted them. But Sabrina forged my signature, used my email, set the whole thing up. Those documents are fake. If they come to light, Rachel goes to jail for fraud." Understanding flickered across Damien's face. "And Sabrina's blackmailing you." "One dinner," she said. "Just show up, act boring, let you dump me, and she'd make Rachel's paperwork disappear." Emily's voice cracked. "I didn't know about the waiter. I swear I didn't know she'd set up something that cruel." "That waiter was paid to humiliate whoever showed up," Damien said quietly. "If it had been Sabrina, she would have made a scene, embarrassed me publicly, made sure I looked like the villain, but you just sat there and took it." "What else was I supposed to do? Fight back. Make a scene. Something." He studied her like she was an equation that didn't balance. "Why would you let people treat you like that?" "Because fighting back never works for people like me," Emily said simply. "People like you, billionaires, powerful people, you can make scenes. You can demand things. When you get angry, people listen. When I get angry, I just get labeled difficult and lose whatever job I'm barely holding on to." The truth of it sat between them, heavy and uncomfortable. Damien was quiet for a long moment, then, "What do you do?" "For work, actually. I'm a reference librarian, city library system. I help people find books, research topics, navigate databases. It's not exciting, it doesn't pay well, but I like it." "Sabrina said you were a consultant." "Sabrina says lots of things." Emily managed a weak smile. "She thinks my job is embarrassing, too boring for her twin sister." "I don't think it's boring." Emily looked up sharply. Damien was watching her with an expression she couldn't decipher, something between curiosity and respect. "You help people find information," he continued. "That's valuable. More valuable than whatever consulting bullshit Sabrina claims to do." He paused. "What's your favorite book?" The question was so unexpected, Emily laughed. "What? Favorite book? You're a librarian. You must have one." The Great Gatsby, I guess." Cliché, but it's about the performance of wealth versus the reality of loneliness. And there's something about Fitzgerald's prose that just... She stopped, suddenly self-conscious. "Why?" "Because Sabrina's favorite book is her own Instagram feed," Damien said dryly. "And you just gave me an actual answer with actual thoughts behind it. You're not like her at all, are you?" "We're identical twins. Genetically, maybe." He stood, carried both their plates to the sink. "But you're nothing alike where it matters." Emily didn't know what to say to that. Didn't know what to do with the warm feeling spreading through her chest, dangerous and unwelcome. This man was Sabrina's, whatever, ex-boyfriend maybe. Victim of Sabrina's schemes, definitely. Getting attached was the worst possible idea. I should go, Emily said, standing. It's late, and you've already done way more than stay. Emily froze. What? Damien turned from the sink, expression serious. It's almost 11. You're exhausted, you've had a traumatic evening, and I don't know what Sabrina might do if you go home tonight. Stay here. Guest room's already set up. Helen will bring you breakfast. Tomorrow, we'll figure out how to handle your sister and protect your friend. You don't have to. I know I don't have to. He moved closer, and Emily's breath caught. He was tall. She'd known that intellectually, but up close it was different. He looked down at her with eyes that had probably intimidated countless business rivals, but right now just looked concerned. But I want to. Someone tried to humiliate you tonight because of your sister's petty revenge fantasy. That's not okay. So let me help, please. The please did it. Such a small word, but coming from Damien Whitmore, a man who probably never asked for anything he couldn't take, it meant something. Okay, Emily whispered. One night. One night, Damien agreed. But they both knew it was a lie. Okay. Emily couldn't sleep. The guest room bed was comfortable, unfairly so, like sleeping on clouds that had been specially trained to support the human body. The house was quiet, just the subtle hum of expensive climate control and the distant sound of wind against windows. Everything should have been perfect for sleep. Instead, Emily lay awake staring at the ceiling, her mind racing through the evening's disasters on an endless loop. Around 2 a.m., she gave up and wandered downstairs. Maybe warm milk or something. Wasn't that what people did in fancy houses? Drank warm milk like they were in a Victorian novel? The kitchen lights were already on. Damien sat at the counter in sweatpants and a t-shirt, laptop open, reading glasses perched on his nose. He looked up when Emily entered, unsurprised. Can't sleep? He asked. Brain won't shut off. Yeah, I know the feeling. He closed the laptop. There's chamomile tea in the cabinet above the sink, or I could make you that warm milk you're thinking about. Emily blinked. How did you? You had the expression of someone considering warm milk, but feeling awkward about it. The corner of his mouth lifted. Common insomnia face. Emily found herself smiling despite everything. She made tea, regular tea, not chamomile, and sat across from him. The kitchen felt different at night, less intimidating, more like a space where real people existed rather than a showroom for wealth. What are you working on? Emily asked, nodding at the laptop. Contract review, boring stuff. At 2 in the morning? Sophie wakes up at 6. Damien shrugged. I do my actual work when she's asleep. That sounds exhausting. It is. He took off his glasses, rubbed his eyes. Without them, he looked younger, more vulnerable. But that's fatherhood. You don't get to be tired. That's not fair. No, he agreed. It's not, but it's true anyway. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Emily asked the question that had been bothering her all evening. Why did you protect me at the restaurant? You could have just left, let me deal with the humiliation on my own. Why did you care? Damien was quiet for so long Emily thought he wouldn't answer. Then, 3 years ago, when my wife died, people treated me like I was broken glass. All these concerned faces, gentle voices, everyone so careful not to say the wrong thing. It was suffocating. But you know what was worse? The people who used it, who saw my grief as an opportunity, investors who thought I'd make bad decisions, competitors who smelled blood, even friends who suddenly needed favors because how could I say no to someone in mourning? He looked at her directly, those dark eyes clear and intense. When I saw you sitting there in that ugly dress, trying so hard to disappear, and that waiter dumped water on you like you were nothing, I recognized it. Someone using you. Someone who thought you wouldn't fight back because you're too kind or too scared or too beaten down to defend yourself. And I couldn't let it stand. Emily's throat tightened. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. Damien stood, took his empty mug to the sink. Just promise me you'll stop letting Sabrina use you. It's not that simple, Rachel. We'll be fine. I'll have my legal team look into those documents tomorrow. they're fake, there's a way to void them without implicating your friend. And if Sabrina tries to retaliate, he paused at the kitchen doorway. Let's just say I have resources your sister can't imagine. Why are you doing this? Emily's voice came out smaller than she intended. You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. Damien looked back at her, and for the first time since she'd met him, he smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes and made him look almost boyish. Maybe I'm tired of people who only want things from me, he said. And maybe you're the first person in years who's looked at me like I'm just a guy making scrambled eggs instead of a bank account with a pulse. He left before Emily could respond. She sat in the kitchen for another hour, tea going cold in her hands, trying to figure out how her life had turned into something she didn't recognize, and trying very, very hard not to think about how Damien Whitmore's smile had made her heart forget to beat. Morning came too early and too bright. Emily woke to sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows she didn't recognize, in a bed that felt like sleeping on a cloud, wearing clothes that weren't hers. For a disoriented moment, she couldn't remember where she was or why her body ached like she'd been hit by a truck. Then it all crashed back. The restaurant. The ice water. Damien's jacket around her shoulders. The kitchen conversation at 2 a.m. that had felt more intimate than anything Emily had experienced in years. She checked her phone. 7:23 a.m. 47 missed calls from Sabrina. 19 texts, each one more unhinged than the last. Where are you? Answer your phone. What did you do? Damien's not responding. Emily. I swear to God, you better not have ruined this. Call me now. Emily turned off her phone. A knock on the door made her jump. Helen's voice came through warm and professional. Breakfast is ready when you are, dear. Mr. Whitmore is already downstairs with Sophie. Sophie. The daughter. Emily's stomach twisted with sudden anxiety. She wasn't ready to meet a 6-year-old, wasn't ready to insert herself further into this strange situation that already felt too complicated. But she couldn't hide in the guest room forever. She found clothes laid out on the chair, more of Claire's things. Jeans and a soft blue sweater that looked expensive in that subtle way, where there's no logo but you can tell it cost $300. Emily changed quickly, ran her fingers through her hair because she had no products or tools to do anything better, and headed downstairs. Voices drifted from the kitchen. A child's high-pitched chatter mixed with Damien's lower responses, patient and attentive in a way that made Emily's chest tighten. She paused in the hallway, suddenly feeling like an intruder. But why can't pandas live in Chicago? The child was asking. Because they need bamboo forests, Damien said, and it's too cold here. We have Lincoln Park Zoo. They could build a bamboo forest. It's not that simple, sweetheart. Everything's not that simple when adults don't want to do it. Emily couldn't help smiling. She stepped into the kitchen doorway and found a scene that looked almost normal if you ignored the fact that the kitchen could fit 3 regular kitchens inside it. Damien stood at the stove flipping pancakes while a small girl sat at the counter, swinging her legs and holding an extremely serious conversation with a stuffed penguin. The girl looked up when Emily entered. She had her father's dark eyes and dark hair pulled into 2 lopsided pigtails that suggested Damien had tried his best, but wasn't quite practiced at hairstyling yet. Who's that? Sophie asked, direct in the way only children can be. This is Emily, Damien said, plating a pancake with more care than Emily had seen him give anything, except maybe his daughter. She's a friend. She's staying with us for a little while. Why? Because I asked her to. Sophie considered this with the gravity of a Supreme Court justice. Then she turned to Emily. Do you like penguins? Emily blinked at the conversational whiplash. Yes? Good. Mr. Waddles likes you then. Sophie held up the stuffed penguin. He doesn't like Daddy's sister Claire because she called him ratty. He's not ratty, Emily said seriously. He's clearly very distinguished. Sophie's face split into a gap-toothed grin. I like her, Daddy. She can stay. Good to know I have your approval, Damien said dryly, but his expression had softened in a way Emily hadn't seen before. He looked at his daughter like she was the only thing in the world that made sense. Pancakes, Em? The nickname landed in Emily's chest like a small explosion. She nodded, not trusting her voice. They ate breakfast together at the counter, Sophie chattering about her sleepover at Grandma's house, Damien interjecting questions and gentle corrections when Sophie started inventing increasingly elaborate stories about the activities that had definitely happened, like riding elephants through the garden. Emily mostly listened, watching the easy rhythm between father and daughter, feeling like she'd stumbled into someone else's life and gotten stuck there. "I have to go to the office for a few hours," Damien said eventually, checking his watch. "Helen will be here, and Claire's coming by around 11. "Is Emily staying?" Sophie asked. "If she wants to." Both of them looked at Emily expectantly. She should leave, should go home, deal with Sabrina, figure out her life without getting more tangled in Damien Whitmore's complicated existence. But the thought of walking back into her cramped apartment and facing her sister's rage made Emily's chest tight with dread. "I can stay for a bit," she heard herself say. Sophie cheered. Damien's expression remained carefully neutral, but something flickered in his eyes that looked almost like relief. After breakfast, Damien disappeared upstairs to change. Sophie dragged Emily into what she called the library, but was actually a room the size of Emily's entire apartment, filled floor to ceiling with books. Real books, not decorative leather-bound sets that rich people bought by the yard. These were worn paperbacks mixed with hardcovers, organized with the kind of system that suggested someone actually read them. "Daddy says you work with books," Sophie said, running her finger along a shelf of picture books. "Do you have a favorite?" "Lots of favorites," Emily said, scanning the shelves with professional curiosity. "What's yours?" "Where the Wild Things Are, because Max gets to be king and nobody tells him what to do." Emily pulled the book from the shelf. Worn spine, pages soft from repeated reading. "This was my favorite too when I was your age." "Really? Really? My sister hated it. She thought Max was bratty." Sophie wrinkled her nose. "Is your sister the mean lady who yells at Daddy on the phone?" Emily's stomach dropped. "You heard that?" "Sometimes." Sophie sat down on the floor, arranging her penguin carefully beside her. "She called last week, and I answered Daddy's phone by accident. She said bad words and told me to get Damien on the phone right now." Sophie mimicked Sabrina's imperious tone with unsettling accuracy. "Daddy took the phone and went into his office, but I could still hear him being angry calm." "Angry calm?" "That's when he's really mad, but his voice gets quiet instead of loud. It's scarier than yelling." Emily sat down across from Sophie, suddenly seeing Damien through his daughter's eyes. A man trying to shield his kid from the ugliness of adult complications while carrying all of it alone. "I'm sorry she was mean to you," Emily said quietly. "My sister isn't always very nice." "Are you nice?" The question was so simple, so direct. Emily thought about all the times she'd let Sabrina manipulate her, use her, push her into situations that made Emily's life smaller and harder. Was that nice, or was it just being a doormat? "I try to be," Emily said finally. "But sometimes trying to be nice means letting people treat you badly. And that's not actually good." Sophie nodded like this made perfect sense. "Daddy says being kind is different than being a pushover." "Your dad's smart." "I know." Sophie opened Where the Wild Things Are to the first page. "Will you read it to me?" Emily read. Sophie leaned against her shoulder by the second page, penguin clutched in one hand, completely absorbed in a story she'd probably heard 100 times. When Emily finished, Sophie immediately requested another book, then another. By the time Damien came back downstairs in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Emily's monthly salary, they'd worked through half the picture book collection. He paused in the doorway, watching them. Emily looked up to find an expression on his face she couldn't quite name, something soft and complicated and a little bit sad. "I have to go," he said. "Claire will be here soon, and Emily—" He hesitated. "My legal team is looking into those documents. We'll figure this out." "You really don't have to—" "I know." He adjusted his cufflinks, not looking at her. "But I'm going to anyway." After he left, Sophie wanted to watch a movie. Emily found herself curled on a couch the size of her entire bed, watching some animated film about talking animals while Sophie provided running commentary on every scene. It felt surreal. Normal and surreal at the same time. Around 11, the front door opened and a voice called out, "Damien? Sophie? I brought bagels." A woman appeared in the living room doorway. Late 20s, dark hair cut in a sharp bob, wearing ripped jeans and a leather jacket that looked both expensive and lived in. She stopped dead when she saw Emily. "Oh," she said, "you're not Sabrina." "No," Emily agreed. "I'm Emily, the twin." Claire Whitmore set down a bag from what was presumably an expensive bagel place and studied Emily with the same unnerving directness as her brother. Damien texted me, said you were staying here and I should be nice. She made air quotes, which implies he thinks I might not be nice, which is offensive. Aunt Claire, Emily read me 7 books, Sophie announced. 7? Overachiever. Claire sat down on the couch arm, still watching Emily. So you're the one who got ice water dumped on her at Luminaire. Word traveled fast, apparently. Emily nodded. And Damien went full protective billionaire mode? He was helpful. Helpful. Claire's mouth twitched. My brother doesn't do helpful. He does transactional. Everything's a negotiation, a power play, a strategic move. Helpful is not in his vocabulary. She paused. Except apparently for you. Emily didn't know what to say to that. Luckily, Sophie chose that moment to demand Aunt Claire's attention for penguin-related matters, giving Emily space to breathe. The rest of the morning passed in a blur. Claire turned out to be funny, sharp-edged, but warm underneath, asking questions that felt more curious than invasive. She stayed for lunch. Helen made sandwiches that were somehow gourmet despite being sandwiches, and grilled Emily about her job at the library with what seemed like genuine interest. I always thought librarians were either ancient or fictional, Claire said, stealing a chip from Sophie's plate. You're neither. Disappointingly real and only 30, Emily confirmed. And you really like it, the library job? I love it. Emily found herself explaining the satisfaction of helping someone find exactly the right book, or teaching an older person how to use the computer system, or watching a kid discover reading for the first time. It's not glamorous, the pay is terrible, but it matters, you know? Information access matters. Claire looked at her like she was a museum exhibit. You're nothing like Sabrina. So I've been told. No, I mean, Sabrina came to Sunday dinner once, spent the entire time on her phone, complained about the food, and told my mother her haircut made her look old. You just spent 20 minutes explaining the Dewey Decimal System to a 6-year-old and looked genuinely happy about it. Emily flushed. Sophie asked, What's, boss? What? Sophie asks everyone questions. Most people give half-assed answers and check their phones. You drew diagrams. Claire leaned back, reassessing. Damien likes you. He barely knows me. Yeah, well, my brother doesn't let strangers stay in his house. Doesn't cook eggs for people at midnight. Doesn't smile like he did when he saw you reading to Sophie this morning. Claire's expression turned serious. He hasn't looked that relaxed around anyone except family in years. So whatever you're doing, keep doing it. I'm not doing anything, Emily protested. I'm just existing. That might be exactly what he needs. Before Emily could unpack that statement, her phone buzzed. She'd turned it back on after Damien left and immediately regretted it. Sabrina's texts had evolved from angry to threatening to weirdly desperate. I'm coming over. We need to talk. This is serious, Emily. You can't just disappear. I know you're at his house. That last one made Emily's blood run cold. How did Sabrina know? What's wrong? Claire asked, immediately picking up on Emily's expression. My sister, she knows I'm here. How? Emily's mind raced. She'd turned off location services, hadn't posted anything, hadn't told anyone except the restaurant. Someone at the restaurant must have told her. The same someone who paid that waiter to dump water on you? Claire's eyes narrowed. Your sister's a piece of work, isn't she? You have no idea. Sophie had wandered off to play with her toys, giving the adults space for a conversation that was clearly heading somewhere dark. Claire moved closer, voice low. Damien told me about the blackmail, the fake documents. Emily's stomach sank. He wasn't supposed to. We don't keep secrets, not about important things. Claire pulled out her phone. I'm a lawyer, corporate law mostly, but I know people who handle fraud cases. Send me everything you have on these documents, and I'll see what can be done. I can't afford... Did I ask you to pay? Claire's tone was sharp, but not unkind. Look, my brother cares about you for some inexplicable reason that I'm sure he hasn't fully processed yet because emotional intelligence isn't his strong suit. That means you're family adjacent, and we protect family. Emily's throat tightened. Why are you being so nice to me? Because you read to my niece without being asked. Because you actually listen when people talk instead of waiting for your turn to speak. And because... Claire hesitated. Because Damien's been half alive since Sarah died. Work and Sophie, that's it. No friends, no life, just this empty routine of being the perfect CEO and perfect father with nothing left over for himself. Then you show up in an ugly dress and suddenly he's cooking midnight eggs and smiling and, I don't know, maybe it means something. We just met, Emily said weakly. Sometimes that's all it takes. Before Emily could respond, her phone rang. Sabrina. Emily stared at the screen, anxiety coiling in her stomach. Don't answer it, Claire advised. She'll just keep calling. Let her. But Emily's fingers were already moving, accepting the call before she could second-guess it. Sabrina's voice exploded through the speaker, shrill and furious. What the hell did you do? Emily walked into the next room, lowering her voice. Nothing. I went to the dinner like you asked. You were supposed to be boring, forgettable. Instead, Damien's lawyers called my lawyers this morning, asking about investment fraud and forged signatures, and you've completely ruined everything. I didn't tell him anything that wasn't true. You had one job, Emily. Show up. Act pathetic. Let him dump me. How did you screw up something so simple? Emily felt something crack inside her chest. Years of taking Sabrina's abuse, letting her twin treat her like a disposable backup plan, swallowing every cruel word because that's what sisters did. It all crystallized into a single moment of clarity. You set me up, Emily said quietly. That waiter, the ice water, you paid someone to humiliate me in public. Silence on the other end. Then, so what? You're fine. You got rescued by your billionaire prince, got to play Cinderella for a night. You tried to destroy me to win some petty power game with a man you don't even like. Don't be dramatic. I could have been hurt, physically hurt. That water was freezing. I could have gone into shock, and you didn't care because all you wanted was to make Damien look bad for not protecting his date. Except he did protect you, Sabrina shot back. Which is the problem. Now he thinks you're some wounded bird that needs saving, and I look like the villain, and my entire plan is ruined because you couldn't even fail correctly. Emily closed her eyes. I'm done. What? I'm done, Sabrina. With the lies, the manipulation, the blackmail. Do whatever you want with Rachel's papers. I'll get a lawyer, we'll fight it, but I'm not playing your games anymore. You don't mean that. I really do. Emily, if you don't... Emily hung up. Her hands were shaking. Her whole body was shaking. She'd never hung up on Sabrina before. Never said no that definitively. It felt terrifying and liberating in equal measure. Claire appeared in the doorway. You okay? No, Emily said honestly, but I will be. That's the spirit. Claire checked her watch. I have to head out, client meeting. But I'm serious about those documents. Send me everything. And Emily? She paused at the door. You're welcome to stay here as long as you need. Damien won't say it because he's emotionally constipated, but he wants you to stay. Sophie definitely wants you to stay, and I think you should stay because your apartment is probably not safe if Sabrina knows where you are. Emily hadn't thought about that. About going home to her tiny studio where Sabrina had a key, where her sister could show up anytime and make Emily's life hell. I can't just move into Damien's house, Emily protested. Why not? We have 7 bedrooms. That's 6 more than we use. Claire grinned. Besides, someone needs to keep my brother human. Might as well be you. She left before Emily could argue further. The afternoon stretched into evening. Helen made dinner, some kind of chicken dish that made Emily want to cry, it was so good. And Sophie insisted Emily sit next to her and tell more stories about the library. By the time Damien came home at 7, Emily had somehow become a fixture in his household. He found them in the living room, Sophie sprawled on the couch, half asleep, Emily reading quietly beside her. He stopped in the doorway, still in his suit, tie loosened, looking exhausted in that particular way that came from too many hours making too many decisions. Hey, he said quietly. Hey. Emily carefully extracted herself from Sophie's sleepy grip. Long day? Very. He crossed to the couch, scooped up his daughter with practiced ease. Come on, sweetheart. Bedtime. But I'm not tired, Sophie mumbled, already mostly asleep. Sure you're not. Emily followed them upstairs without being asked, feeling like she was part of some routine she hadn't quite earned yet. Damien tucked Sophie into bed, a process that involved extensive penguin arrangement and 3 separate requests for water. and when he finally emerged from her room, he looked like he might collapse. "You okay?" Emily asked. Meeting ran late. Then there was a crisis with a property acquisition. Then my mother called to lecture me about something Claire apparently said at Sunday dinner 3 weeks ago. He rubbed his eyes. "I'm fine." "You look exhausted." "I'm always exhausted." He started toward the stairs, then paused. "Claire said you hung up on Sabrina. News travels fast in your family. We text. A lot." He studied her. "You really told her you were done?" "Yeah." "How do you feel?" Emily considered the question honestly. "Scared, relieved, like I jumped off a cliff and I'm not sure if I'm flying or falling." "That's usually how freedom feels at first." Damien leaned against the wall, and for the first time since she'd met him, he looked genuinely uncertain. "Emily, I need to ask you something." "Okay." "Why did you stay today? You could have left this morning, gone home, but you stayed." Emily's heart was beating too fast. She knew what he was really asking. "Why are you here? What do you want from me? Are you another person who's going to use me?" "I stayed because Sophie asked me to read to her," Emily said slowly. "And because your house is nicer than my apartment. And because I was scared to face my sister alone." She took a breath. "And because when you smile at your daughter, you look like a completely different person than the billionaire who intimidates entire boardrooms. And I wanted to see if that person was real." Damien was very still. And I think he is. I think you're exhausted and lonely and doing your best with impossible circumstances. I think you care about people more than you let on, and I think—" Emily stopped herself. "What?" "I think I like you," she finished quietly. "The real you, not the billionaire version, just you." The silence that followed felt like standing on the edge of something vast and dangerous. Damien looked at her with those dark eyes that gave away nothing and everything at once. Then he crossed the space between them in 2 steps and kissed her. It wasn't smooth. Emily had read enough romance novels to know what smooth kisses looked like. Perfectly choreographed. No awkward nose bumps. Instant chemistry. This wasn't that. This was Damien's hand cupping her face like she might disappear, his mouth finding hers with something between desperation and reverence. Emily's surprised gasp against his lips before she kissed him back with all the confused wanting she'd been trying to ignore since the moment he'd wrapped his jacket around her shoulders. When they broke apart, Damien rested his forehead against hers, breathing hard. "I don't do this," he said roughly. "I don't kiss women I barely know. I don't let strangers into my house. I don't—" "I know. But I can't stop thinking about you." "I know," Emily whispered. "Me too." He kissed her again, slower this time, like he was trying to memorize the shape of her mouth. Emily's hands found his shirt, fisting in the expensive fabric, pulling him closer. She'd never felt like this wanting that was terrifying and exhilarating and so real it hurt. When they finally broke apart for air, Damien looked wrecked. "Stay," he said. "Not just tonight. Stay here where you're safe from Sabrina. Stay until we figure this out." "Figure what out?" "Everything. The documents, your sister, this." He gestured between them, helpless. "Whatever this is." Emily should say no, should maintain boundaries, protect herself, not fall for a billionaire single dad with trust issues and a complicated life. But she looked at Damien, really looked at him, and saw someone just as scared and confused as she was. "Okay," she said. "I'll stay." His smile was worth every risk. They stood in the hallway for a long moment, neither quite ready to move. Then Damien's phone buzzed. He checked it, expression darkening. "What is it?" "My lawyer. Your sister's threatening legal action. Something about defamation and emotional distress." Emily's stomach dropped. "She's bluffing." "Probably, but she's also escalating." He pocketed the phone. "Which means we need to move faster. I'll have my team expedite the document review. If we can prove Rachel's innocent and that Sabrina forged your signature, we can shut this down before it gets worse." "And if we can't?" Damien's jaw tightened. "Then we fight. I have better lawyers." It should have been reassuring. Instead, Emily just felt tired. Tired of being in the middle of Sabrina's chaos. Tired of always being the one who had to clean up her sister's messes. "Hey," Damien tilted her chin up gently. "We'll figure it out, together. You don't have to fix my life." "I know, but I want to help." If you'll let me. Emily wanted to cry, wanted to collapse into his arms and let him solve everything because she was so tired of being strong alone. But she also knew that wasn't fair. This was her mess. Her sister. Her responsibility. I'll let you help, she said finally. But I'm not a project, Damien. I'm not broken. I'm just stuck. I know you're not broken. His thumb traced her cheekbone. You're the strongest person I've met in years. You just don't know it yet. Emily did cry then. Just a few tears, quickly wiped away. But Damien saw them anyway. He pulled her into his chest, wrapping his arms around her like he could shield her from everything wrong in the world. They stood like that until Emily stopped shaking. Come on, Damien said eventually. Let's get some sleep. Tomorrow we start fighting back. Emily nodded against his chest, breathing in cedar and warmth and the unfamiliar feeling of being protected instead of abandoned. As she got ready for bed in the guest room that was starting to feel almost like home, Emily's phone buzzed with one final text from Sabrina. You're making a huge mistake. He'll get bored of you. They always do. Emily stared at the message for a long moment. Then she blocked Sabrina's number and turned off her phone. Maybe Damien would get bored. Maybe this whole thing would crash and burn spectacularly. But for the first time in her life, Emily was choosing to take a risk on something that felt real instead of safe. She fell asleep thinking about Damien's hands in her hair, his mouth on hers, the way he'd looked at her like she was something precious. And somewhere in the dangerous space between awake and dreaming, Emily let herself hope that maybe, just maybe, she deserved this. The next 2 weeks passed in a strange blur of domesticity and tension that Emily couldn't quite reconcile. She'd moved into the Whitmore mansion with nothing but the clothes on her back and a growing sense that she was living someone else's life. Every morning she woke up in Egyptian cotton sheets that probably cost more than her monthly rent. Every evening she helped Sophie with homework at a kitchen counter the size of Emily's entire studio apartment, and every night she lay awake thinking about Damien's kiss and wondering when the other shoe would drop, because it always dropped. In Emily's experience, good things didn't last. She'd taken a leave of absence from the library, unpaid, which terrified her, but Damien's legal team insisted she stay away from her usual routines until they could neutralize Sabrina's threats. Rachel had called exactly once, confused and scared about lawyers contacting her regarding documents she barely remembered signing. Emily had explained everything through tears while Claire conferenced in her fraud specialist to walk Rachel through what would happen next. By the end of the call, Rachel was crying too. But at least she understood she wasn't going to jail. Sabrina, meanwhile, had gone ominously quiet. No calls, no texts, no dramatic appearances, just silence, which somehow felt more threatening than her usual chaos. She's planning something, Claire said on day 9, sprawled across Damien's office couch like she owned it. Emily sat in one of the leather chairs, pretending to read while actually eavesdropping on Claire's analysis of Sabrina's psychological warfare tactics. Radio silence isn't her style. She's regrouping. Or she's realized she has no legal standing and gave up, Damien countered from behind his desk, not looking up from whatever contract he was reviewing. You don't know my sister, Emily said quietly. Both Whitmore siblings looked at her. Emily set down her book, some thriller she'd been staring at for 20 minutes without absorbing a single word. Sabrina doesn't give up when she loses, Emily continued. She just changes tactics, gets meaner, finds new pressure points. She picked at a loose thread on her borrowed sweater. When we were 16, I beat her in this essay competition. State level, scholarship money, kind of a big deal. She smiled and congratulated me in front of our parents. Let me guess, Claire said. That wasn't the end of it. She spent the next 3 months systematically destroying every friendship I had, told people I'd cheated, spread rumors about why the male judge had really picked my essay, made my life so miserable I almost withdrew from the scholarship entirely. Emily's voice was flat, reciting facts. She only stopped when I agreed to split the money with her, said it was fair since we were twins and should share everything. Damien had gone very still. And your parents? Thought I was being generous, praised me for being the good sister who looked out for family. Emily laughed, but it sounded hollow. That's always been my role. The good one. The quiet one. The one who fixes Sabrina's messes and takes her abuse because that's what family does. The silence that followed was heavy. Claire looked furious. Damien looked like he was calculating exactly how much legal destruction he could rain down on Sabrina Carter without it technically counting as a felony. "She's not going to do that to you anymore," Damien said finally, voice low and dangerous. "I won't let her. You can't protect me from everything. Watch me." Emily wanted to argue, wanted to explain that Sabrina was a force of nature that couldn't be contained by lawyers and money and billionaire intimidation. But the look in Damien's eyes stopped her. He meant it. He would burn down the world to keep Emily safe, and that terrified her almost as much as it warmed something deep in her chest. Before anyone could say more, Sophie burst into the office without knocking, a habit that clearly drove Damien crazy, but he never actually corrected. "Emily, you have to come see what Mr. Waddles did." "What did Mr. Waddles do?" Emily asked, grateful for the interruption. "He learned to skateboard," Claire snorted. "A stuffed penguin learned to skateboard." "Don't be dismissive, Aunt Claire. Mr. Waddles is very athletic." Emily let Sophie drag her out of the office, leaving the Whitmore siblings to their legal strategizing. She spent the next hour watching Sophie demonstrate increasingly elaborate scenarios involving Mr. Waddles, a toy skateboard, and what appeared to be an entire city built from blocks and picture books. "He's going to the Olympics," Sophie explained seriously. "But first he has to defeat the evil Baron von Fluffington." "Who's Baron von Fluffington?" Sophie held up a bedraggled teddy bear missing one eye. "He wants to ban all penguins from skateboarding because he's jealous of their natural talent." Emily bit back a smile. "That's very unfair of him." "I know. That's why Mr. Waddles has to win, to prove that penguins can do anything if they believe in themselves." There was something so pure about Sophie's imagination, so untainted by the complications of adult life. Emily found herself relaxing in a way she hadn't in weeks, just playing along with elaborate penguin adventures and building block towers that Sophie immediately knocked down with gleeful destruction. They were in the middle of constructing what Sophie called the ultimate penguin training facility when Damien appeared in the doorway. He'd changed out of his suit into jeans and a sweater, looking more human and less like a Forbes cover photo. "Dinner in 20 minutes, he said. Sophie didn't look up from her blocks. "Is Helen making the pasta?" "She is." "The good pasta or the vegetables pretending to be pasta?" "The good pasta. I negotiated." "You're the best daddy ever." Damien's expression softened in that way that made Emily's chest hurt. He looked at Sophie like she'd hung the moon and stars personally. "Go wash your hands, sweetheart." After Sophie thundered off toward the bathroom, Damien moved into the playroom. He started helping Emily clean up blocks without being asked, working in comfortable silence. "She likes you," he said eventually. "I like her too. She's easy to like." Most people find 6-year-olds exhausting. Most people don't appreciate the narrative complexity of penguin skateboarding sagas. Emily stacked the last block. "She's smart, Damien. Really smart. And creative. She gets that from her mother." He said it casually, but Emily heard the grief underneath. 3 years wasn't that long when you'd lost someone you loved. "What was she like? Your wife?" Damien was quiet for a long moment. Emily wondered if she'd overstepped, pushed into territory she had no right to explore. But then he sat back on his heels, staring at the toy-strewn floor like he could see into the past. Sarah was brilliant, literally. She had a PhD in environmental engineering, worked on sustainable building design. We met at a conference where I was speaking about real estate development, and she was in the audience specifically to challenge every point I made about urban planning. He smiled at the memory. She eviscerated my entire presentation during the Q&A. I asked her to dinner just to defend myself. "Sounds like you didn't stand a chance." I didn't. She was everything I wasn't, passionate, optimistic, believed people could change the world through good design and smart policy. I was just a guy trying to build buildings and make money. He picked up Mr. Waddles, turning the penguin over in his hands. She made me better, made me think about legacy instead of just profit. Sophie was her idea. I was terrified of being a father, but Sarah just knew we'd figure it out. And then you lost her. Car accident. Drunk driver ran a red light. She died on impact. His voice was carefully controlled, like he'd practiced this story until it didn't hurt to tell. Except Emily could see it still hurt. Would probably always hurt. Sophie was 3. Barely understood what death meant. I had to explain that Mommy wasn't coming home and I had no idea what I was doing and the company was in the middle of this massive acquisition and I just... He stopped. I survived. That's what you do. You survive for your kid. Emily's throat was tight. You're doing more than surviving. You're raising an amazing little girl who thinks penguins can change the world through skateboarding. That's all her. I just try not to screw it up too badly. Damien, Emily waited until he looked at her. You're a good father. Sophie knows she's loved. That's what matters. He studied her face like he was trying to figure out if she meant it or if she was just being kind. Emily held his gaze, willing him to see the truth. She'd been watching him with Sophie for 2 weeks now, watched him braid hair badly and negotiate vegetable consumption and read bedtime stories with different voices for every character. Watched him come home exhausted and still make time to hear about Sophie's day in excruciating 6-year-old detail. Whatever else Damian Whitmore was, billionaire, CEO, emotionally guarded workaholic, he was a devoted father first. Something shifted in his expression. He reached out, tucked a strand of hair behind Emily's ear, let his hand linger against her cheek. You make it easier, he said quietly. Having you here, it's easier. Before Emily could respond, Sophie's voice echoed through the house. Daddy! Emily! Pasta! The moment broke. Damien stood, offered Emily his hand, pulled her to her feet, but his thumb brushed across her knuckles before he let go, and Emily felt that small touch all the way to her bones. Dinner was chaotic in the best way. Sophie talked nonstop about a girl in her class who claimed to have a pet dragon, which led to a lengthy debate about whether dragons could be domesticated and what they would eat. Helen served pasta with homemade sauce that made Emily want to cry. It was so good. Damien contributed dry observations that made Sophie giggle and Emily hide her smile in her napkin. It felt like family, like belonging, and that scared Emily more than anything Sabrina could do. After dinner, after Sophie's bath and bedtime routine, and the final negotiation over how many stuffed animals could fit in one bed, Emily retreated to her room. She'd been staying in the same guest room for 2 weeks, but it still didn't feel like hers. Too perfect, too expensive, too temporary. She was changing into pajamas when her phone rang. Unknown number. Emily almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Emily Carter? A woman's voice, professional and clipped. Yes? This is Janet Morrison from Chicago Metro News. I'm doing a story on Damian Whitmore and his relationship with Sabrina Carter. Sources tell me you're Sabrina's twin sister, and you've been staying at Mr. Whitmore's residence. I'd love to get your comment. Emily's stomach dropped. No comment. Is it true you impersonated your sister on a date with Mr. Whitmore? That there was an incident at Billionaire restaurant involving... Emily hung up. Her hands were shaking. How did the press know? Who had talked? The restaurant staff? Someone Sabrina paid? She was halfway to Damien's office when she met him in the hallway. He took one look at her face and his expression darkened. What happened? A reporter just called. They know about the restaurant, about me staying here. They're writing a story. Damien's jaw tightened. What did you tell them? Nothing. I hung up. But Damien, if this goes public, it won't. You can't know that. I have a PR team that handles this kind of thing. They'll kill the story. How? The truth is the truth. I did impersonate Sabrina. I am staying in your house. Those are facts. Facts without context are just gossip. He pulled out his phone, already texting. My team will release a statement explaining that you were helping resolve a personal matter involving your sister, that I'm providing temporary assistance to a friend facing harassment, and that the incident at Billionaire was a criminal act by a restaurant employee who has since been terminated. That makes me sound like a charity case. That makes you sound like a person I'm helping, which is true. He looked up from his phone. Emily, I told you I would protect you. That includes from tabloid vultures. I don't want to be protected. I want... She stopped, frustrated and scared and unable to articulate the tangled mess of feelings in her chest. I don't belong in this world. Your world. Press coverage and PR teams and crisis management. I'm a librarian from a crappy apartment who can barely afford groceries some months. This is too much. So what are you saying? I'm saying maybe I should go home before this gets more complicated. The silence that followed felt like falling off a cliff. Damien stared at her, expression carefully blank in that way that meant he was furious or hurt, or both. Is that what you want? He asked, voice dangerously quiet. To leave? I don't know what I want. I've been living in your house for 2 weeks, pretending to be part of your life when we both know this isn't real. You kissed me once, and we haven't talked about it. Sophie thinks I'm her friend, but I'm going to disappear eventually and break her heart. And now the press is involved, and you think this isn't real? Emily's breath caught at the intensity in his voice. Damien moved closer, crowding into her space in a way that made her pulse race. You think I let random people live in my house, read to my daughter, eat dinner at my table every night? You think I tell strangers about my dead wife and how terrified I was when she died? I don't do casual, Emily. I don't have the time or energy for games. So if you're here just because you're scared of your sister and I'm a convenient hiding place, tell me now. But if you're here because you feel what I feel, he stopped, jaw working. Then stop talking about leaving and start talking about what you actually want. Emily's heart was trying to escape her chest. What do you feel? Like I'm falling for someone I barely know, and it's terrifying, and I can't stop thinking about you, and I have no idea what I'm doing. The words came out rough, unpolished. I kissed you because I've wanted to kiss you since you sat in my kitchen at 2 a.m. drinking tea and talking about books like they mattered. And I didn't bring it up again because I was giving you space to figure out what you wanted without pressure. But Emily, if you walk out that door, you're not doing it because the press called. You're doing it because you're scared. Of course I'm scared. You're a billionaire single dad with a perfect daughter and a dead wife you still love, and I'm nobody. You're not nobody. Damien's hands framed her face, gentle but insistent. You're the person who makes Sophie laugh, who helps Helen with dishes even though that's not your job, who fell asleep on my couch last week reading the same page of your book over and over because you were too tired to process words but too stubborn to admit it. You're the person who makes me want to come home at the end of the day instead of hiding in my office until midnight. Damien, I'm falling in love with you, he said, and the words landed between them like a grenade. And yeah, it's too fast and probably a terrible idea, and my therapist would have a field day with my timing, but it's true. So if you want to leave because you don't feel the same way, I'll respect that. But don't leave because you think you're not enough. You're more than enough. Emily couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only stare at this complicated, damaged man who'd somehow decided she was worth the risk. I'm falling in love with you too, she whispered, and it terrifies me. Damien's smile was slow and devastating. Good. We can be terrified together. He kissed her like he was trying to prove a point, like he could convince her through touch alone that she belonged here, in his arms, in his life. Emily kissed him back with all the confused wanting and fear and hope tangled in her chest. His hands were in her hair, hers fisted in his shirt, and somewhere in the back of her mind, Emily registered that this was too much too fast, too intense. And she didn't care. They broke apart, breathing hard. Damien rested his forehead against hers, eyes closed. Stay, he said. Please. Okay, Emily breathed. Okay. They stood like that in the hallway until Emily's phone rang again. She pulled it out, saw the same unknown number, sent it to voicemail. Tomorrow we deal with the press, Damien said. Tonight we just exist? Yeah, that. They went downstairs to the living room. Damien poured them both wine, something expensive that Emily couldn't appreciate because her taste in wine stopped at red or white. And they sat on the couch that could fit 8 people easily, not touching, just existing in the same space. Tell me about your family, Damien said eventually. Besides Sabrina, Emily sipped her wine, trying to figure out where to start. My parents are fine. They love us, I think. They just never noticed that one daughter was slowly destroying the other, or if they noticed, they didn't think it was important enough to address. How long has Sabrina been like this? Always. Even when we were kids. Emily stared into her wine glass. I have this memory from first grade. There was this art contest at school, and I won with this painting of a tree. Nothing special, just a kid's painting. But Sabrina was so angry. She went into my room that night and destroyed it, ripped it to pieces. When our parents found out, she cried and said I'd accused her unfairly, that maybe the dog had gotten into my room. You didn't have a dog? No. But our parents believed her anyway. They always believed her. Emily took another drink. That's when I learned it was easier to just give Sabrina what she wanted. Easier than fighting. Easier than being called the jealous twin who couldn't handle her sister's success. Damien's expression was dark. That's abuse, Emily. What she's done to you for years, that's abuse. She's my sister. That doesn't give her the right to treat you like garbage. He set down his wine glass with careful control. Has she ever physically hurt you? Emily hesitated too long. Damien's eyes narrowed. Emily, once, in college. We were at a party, and I was talking to this guy she liked. She waited until we were alone and pushed me down the stairs. Emily touched her collarbone reflexively, remembering the break, the pain, the hospital visit where she'd lied and said she tripped. Hairline fracture could have been worse. Damien looked like he wanted to put his fist through a wall. And you still helped her. After that, she's my twin, my family. I didn't know how to stop being her safety net. Emily's voice cracked. I know it sounds pathetic. It sounds like someone who's been gaslit and manipulated for so long she thinks it's normal. Damien moved closer, took her wine glass and set it aside, held both her hands in his. You're not going back to that. Whatever happens with the press, the legal stuff, Sabrina's next move, you're not facing it alone. Why are you so determined to save me? Because you're worth saving, and because... He stopped, looking frustrated with himself. Because when Sarah died, I shut down. Went through the motions of being alive without actually living. Work and Sophie, that was it. Nothing else mattered. And then you showed up in that terrible dress looking terrified, and I felt something I hadn't felt in 3 years. What? The desire to protect someone who couldn't protect themselves. He traced patterns on her palm. I know that sounds arrogant, like I think you're some damsel in distress. But Emily, you've spent your whole life protecting everyone except yourself, your sister, your friend, probably random strangers at the library who need help, and you give it because that's who you are. So yeah, I want to protect you, not because you're weak, because you deserve someone in your corner for once. Emily's vision blurred with tears. She'd been holding it together for weeks, months, really, years if she was honest, and Damien's words cracked something open in her chest. I'm so tired, she whispered. I'm so tired of being strong. Then don't be. Not tonight. He pulled her into his arms, and Emily let herself break. Cried into his shoulder while he held her, one hand stroking her hair, murmuring things she couldn't quite hear but felt in her bones. No one had held her like this since... Had anyone ever held her like this? Like she was something precious worth protecting? When the tears finally stopped, Emily felt wrung out and exhausted and strangely lighter. Damien didn't let go, just kept holding her until her breathing evened out. Better? He asked quietly. Yeah, sorry, I don't usually... Don't apologize for crying. You're allowed to have feelings. Emily pulled back enough to look at him. His shirt was damp from her tears, his expression soft in a way she'd never seen before. On impulse, she kissed him, soft and grateful, and full of things she couldn't put into words. Damien responded immediately, deepening the kiss, pulling her closer. It was different than before, less desperate, more inevitable, like they both knew where this was heading and had stopped fighting it. Stay with me tonight, Damien said against her mouth. Not, we don't have to do anything. Just stay. Emily should say no. Should maintain boundaries, take things slow, think about the implications. Instead, she nodded. They went upstairs to Damien's room, a space Emily had never seen before. It was surprisingly normal. Big bed? Yes, but not ostentatiously so. Books on the nightstand, photos of Sophie on the dresser, a framed picture of a woman who must have been Sarah, beautiful and laughing, frozen in a moment before everything fell apart. Emily changed in the bathroom, borrowed t-shirt and shorts, while Damien did the same in the bedroom. When she emerged, he was already in bed, covers pulled back on one side in invitation. Emily climbed in. The sheets were cool and soft and smelled like cedar. Damien pulled her against his chest, arms wrapped around her waist, and they lay there in the dark, not talking. Thank you, Emily whispered eventually. For what? For seeing me. The real me. Damien's arms tightened. Thank you for staying. Emily fell asleep listening to his heartbeat, feeling safer than she had in years, and for once not waiting for disaster to strike. She should have known better. The disaster arrived 3 days later in the form of Claire bursting into the kitchen during breakfast, tablet in hand, expression grim. "We have a problem," she announced. Damien looked up from Sophie's elaborate syrup distribution project. "What kind of problem?" "The kind where Sabrina gave an exclusive interview to Chicago Metro News, and it goes live in 2 hours." Claire handed over the tablet. "The preview is already trending." Emily's stomach dropped. She moved to look over Damien's shoulder, reading the preview text that made her blood run cold. Twin sister speaks out. The truth about Damien Whitmore's secret romance. Sabrina Carter reveals how billionaire CEO manipulated her family, seduced her vulnerable sister, and destroyed their relationship in exclusive tell-all interview. That manipulative... Damien bit off the curse, glancing at Sophie, who was still absorbed in her pancakes. "It gets worse," Claire said. "She's claiming you're emotionally abusive, that you isolated Emily from her family, that Emily's staying with you against her will, that the whole restaurant incident was staged by you to make Sabrina look bad." Emily couldn't breathe. "She's lying. All of it. We know she's lying," Damien said, voice deadly calm. "But the public doesn't." "The article publishes in 2 hours," Claire repeated. "We need a counter-strategy now." Sophie looked up, sensing the tension. "What's wrong?" "Nothing, sweetheart," Damien said too quickly. "Finish your breakfast." But Sophie wasn't fooled. She looked at Emily with those big dark eyes that saw too much. "Is the mean lady being mean again?" Emily's heart cracked. She knelt beside Sophie's chair. "Yeah, but we're going to handle it." "How?" "I don't know yet," Emily admitted. "But your dad's really smart. He'll figure it out." Sophie considered this, then turned to Damien. "Daddy, you should sue her for being a liar." "That's actually not bad advice," Claire muttered. Damien was already on his phone, texting rapid fire. "I'm calling an emergency meeting with PR and legal. Emily, I need you to write down everything, every interaction with Sabrina, every text message, every threat. Documentation for our counterstatement." "Counterstatement?" "We're not letting her control the narrative." His eyes were hard, calculating. This was Damien Whitmore, the CEO, the man who'd built an empire through ruthless strategy. "If she wants a war, we'll give her one. But we'll win." The next 2 hours were a blur. Lawyers arrived. PR specialists took over the dining room. Emily sat at Damien's desk, writing out a timeline of Sabrina's manipulation, while Claire grilled her for details. Every cruel thing Sabrina had done, every lie she'd told, every time she'd used Emily as a weapon, it all went into the record. By the time the article went live, they were ready. Damien's counterstatement hit social media simultaneously, backed by documentation Emily had provided, screenshots of Sabrina's threatening texts, testimony from the Luminaire staff about being paid to stage the humiliation, and a carefully worded explanation of the blackmail scheme involving Rachel's forged documents. The internet exploded. Within an hour, the narrative had shifted. Sabrina went from sympathetic victim to calculating villain. People started digging into her background, finding other people she'd scammed or manipulated. The restaurant incident became evidence of her cruelty rather than Damien's negligence. But Emily felt sick watching it unfold. "This is what you wanted," Claire said, finding Emily hiding in the library while the PR team celebrated their social media victory. Sabrina exposed the truth out there. "I wanted her to stop hurting me," Emily said quietly. "I didn't want to destroy her life." "She was trying to destroy yours." "That doesn't make this feel better." Claire sat down beside her. "You're too kind. You know that?" "Everyone keeps telling me that like it's a flaw." "It's not a flaw. It's just dangerous when you're dealing with people who see kindness as weakness." Claire was quiet for a moment. "Emily, Sabrina made her choices. She gave that interview knowing it was lies. She tried to manipulate public opinion to hurt you and Damien. The consequences are hers to deal with." "She's still my sister." "Being related doesn't obligate you to set yourself on fire to keep her warm." Emily knew Claire was right, knew Sabrina had brought this on herself, but it didn't stop the guilt churning in her stomach. The little voice that sounded like her mother saying Emily should forgive, should be the bigger person, should remember they were family. Damien found her an hour later, still sitting in the library while the sun set outside. "Hey," he said softly. "You okay?" "Not really." He sat beside her, took her hand. "The article's been retracted." Chicago Metro News issued an apology. Our legal team is pursuing defamation charges. I don't want to sue my sister. Emily, I know what she did. I know she deserves it, but I can't, her voice broke. I can't be the person who destroys my own family. Damien was quiet for a long moment, then, what do you want to happen? I want her to leave me alone. I want Rachel safe. I want to stop feeling like I'm waiting for the next disaster. Emily looked at him. Is that possible? Can we make this stop without scorched earth? Maybe. He pulled out his phone, made a call. Mark? Yeah, it's Damien. What would it take to make the Sabrina situation go away permanently? Uh-huh. And she'd have to agree to? Right. Set it up. He hung up, turned to Emily. Here's the deal. We drop the defamation suit. My lawyers make Rachel's document problem disappear completely. In exchange, Sabrina signs an NDA and a legally binding agreement never to contact you, me, or anyone in my family again. She violates it. We sue for everything she has. She'll never agree to that. She will if the alternative is jail time for fraud and forgery. Damien's smile was sharp. Your sister's a survivor, Emily. When cornered, she'll take the exit that saves her skin. He was right. 2 days later, Sabrina's lawyer called. She'd sign. The meeting happened in a conference room at Damien's lawyer's office, neutral territory with witnesses and legal protection. Emily hadn't seen Sabrina in person since the night of the disastrous dinner, and walking into that room felt like stepping into a nightmare. Sabrina looked different, thinner, harder. Her perfect facade had cracks Emily had never noticed before. Hello, sister, Sabrina said, voice dripping false sweetness. Don't, Emily said quietly. Just sign the papers. After everything I've done for you, everything you've done to me, Emily corrected. There's a difference. Sabrina's lawyer, a tired-looking man who clearly regretted taking this case, pushed the documents across the table. Miss Carter, I strongly advise you to sign. The alternative is criminal prosecution. For a long moment, Sabrina just stared at Emily. Then she picked up the pen. You think you've won, she said, signing her name with vicious strokes. You think running to your billionaire boyfriend makes you better than me. But you're just like me, Emily. You just hide it better. I'm nothing like you, Emily said, and for the first time in her life, she believed it. Sabrina signed the last page, shoved the documents back, and stood. I hope he's worth it. I hope when he gets bored and trades you in for someone shinier, you remember you destroyed your own family for him. She left without looking back. Emily sat in the conference room after everyone else had gone, staring at the signed papers that meant she was finally free. You okay? Damien asked quietly. I don't know. Ask me in a year. He pulled her to her feet, wrapped his arms around her. You did the right thing. Then why do I feel awful? Because you're a good person, and good people feel bad even when they make necessary choices. He kissed the top of her head. But Emily, you're free now. She can't hurt you anymore. Emily let herself believe it. Let herself hope that maybe, finally, she could build a life that was hers instead of existing in Sabrina's shadow. They went home, and Emily realized she'd started thinking of the Whitmore mansion as home. Sophie met them at the door with Mr. Waddles and an elaborate story about how the penguin had learned to fly that afternoon. Helen had dinner waiting. Claire showed up uninvited and stayed for dessert, teasing Damien about something work-related that made him actually laugh. Later, after Sophie was asleep and Claire had left and the house was quiet, Emily stood on the balcony looking out at the Chicago skyline. Damien found her there, wrapped his arms around her from behind. What are you thinking? He asked. That 3 weeks ago I was a librarian barely making rent. Now I'm living in a mansion with a billionaire and his daughter, and I've legally separated myself from my twin sister. It's surreal. Good surreal or bad surreal? Emily turned in his arms. I don't know yet. Ask me in another 3 weeks. Damien smiled, brushed his thumb across her cheekbone. I can do that. He kissed her under the city lights, and Emily let herself fall completely, trusting that maybe, just maybe, this time she'd land somewhere soft. But freedom turned out to be more complicated than Emily had imagined. The signed document sat in Damien's safe, legally binding proof that Sabrina couldn't contact her anymore. Rachel's fraud case had been quietly dismissed, the fake investment documents voided by lawyers who charged more per hour than Emily made in a week. The press had moved on to other scandals. On paper, everything was resolved. Emily still woke up at 3 a.m. expecting disaster. She'd been living at the Whitmore mansion for 5 weeks now, and the guilt was starting to eat her alive. Not guilt about Sabrina, that was its own complicated mess, but guilt about being a 30-year-old woman living rent-free in someone else's home, wearing someone else's clothes, contributing nothing except her presence. "You're thinking too loud," Damien mumbled beside her in the dark. They'd been sharing his bed for 2 weeks now, though they still hadn't slept together in any way beyond actual sleep. Damien seemed content to take things slow, which Emily appreciated and also found mildly terrifying because what if slow meant he was having second thoughts? "Sorry, go back to sleep." "Can't. You're radiating anxiety." He rolled over, propped himself on one elbow. Even half asleep and rumpled, he was unfairly attractive. "What's wrong?" "Nothing. Everything. I don't know." Emily stared at the ceiling. "I need to go back to work." "Your leave of absence ends in 2 weeks. I already extended it once. I can't keep hiding here pretending my real life doesn't exist." Damien was quiet for a moment. "Is that what you think you're doing? Hiding?" "Aren't I? I thought you were staying here because you wanted to, because of Sophie, because of—" He stopped. "Because of us." "I am. I do. But Damien, I can't just live in your house forever like some kept woman." "Kept woman? Emily, that's not—" "Then what am I?" She sat up, suddenly needing space. "I don't pay rent. I don't contribute financially. I just exist here in this bubble where everything's perfect and nothing's real." "You think this isn't real?" "I think this is your life, your house, your world. I'm just visiting." Damien sat up too, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "So what do you want to do? Move out? Go back to your apartment where your sister knows the address?" "Sabrina can't contact me. We have a legal agreement." "A piece of paper doesn't stop someone determined to make your life hell." His voice was sharp now, frustration bleeding through. "Emily, you're safe here. Why would you leave?" "Because I need to have my own life." The words came out louder than Emily intended. "I need to work, pay my own bills, be my own person instead of just your girlfriend who lives in your house and plays with your daughter and has no identity outside of you." The silence that followed was thick and ugly. Damien's expression had gone carefully blank, which Emily was learning meant he was hurt but wouldn't show it. "I didn't realize you felt that way," he said quietly. "That's not what I meant. You're right. You should go back to work, have your own life." He got out of bed, pulled on sweatpants. "I'll have Helen help you pack your things in the morning." "Damien, it's fine, Emily. You want independence. I get it." He was halfway to the door. "That's not what I'm saying." He stopped, back still to her. "Then what are you saying?" Emily's throat was tight. She was screwing this up, saying everything wrong, pushing away the best thing that had ever happened to her because she was terrified it was too good to last. "I'm saying I'm scared," she admitted quietly. "I'm scared that I'm getting too comfortable, that I'm falling too hard, that one day you'll wake up and realize I'm just a librarian with student loan debt and a crazy family, and you'll wonder what you were thinking." Damien turned around slowly. "You think I'm going to get bored of you?" "Everyone does eventually." "Everyone like who? Sabrina? Your parents who ignored how she treated you? Some asshole ex-boyfriend?" He moved back toward the bed. "Emily, I'm falling in love with you. Not the idea of you. Not some fantasy. You. The woman who talks to herself while she reads, who makes the same terrible jokes at breakfast that Sophie thinks are hilarious. Who spent an hour last Tuesday helping Helen organize the pantry because you noticed it stressed her out. Those are all boring things. Those are all real things, human things. You think I want some polished, perfect woman who never has insecurities or bad days?" He sat on the edge of the bed. "I had perfect. Sarah was brilliant and beautiful and had her whole life together. And I loved her. But she's gone. And I spent 3 years convinced I'd never feel anything again, that I'd just go through the motions until Sophie was grown, and then what? Keep going through motions?" Emily's eyes stung. "I'm not trying to replace her. I know, and I'm not asking you to." He reached for her hand. "But Emily, you make me want things again. A future. A life outside work and parenting. Someone to talk to at 3 a.m. when the anxiety gets too loud. I don't want perfect. I want real. I want you. Even when I'm a mess? Especially when you're a mess. Because you let me be a mess too. Emily felt something break open in her chest. She launched herself at him, kissing him hard, trying to convey through touch what she couldn't articulate with words. Damien caught her, kissing back with equal intensity, hands tangling in her hair. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Emily pressed her forehead to his. I want to go back to work, she said. Not because I want to leave you, because I need to remember who I am outside of this situation. But I'll come home to you every night if you'll have me. Every night, Damien agreed. And Emily, you're not a kept woman. You're the person I'm keeping. It was cheesy and possessive and should have annoyed her. Instead, Emily smiled against his mouth. That was a terrible line. Sophie's been teaching me jokes. Apparently I need to practice. Please never stop being bad at jokes. Deal. They went back to bed, tangled together, and Emily slept better than she had in weeks. 2 days later, Emily walked back into the Chicago Public Library for the first time in over a month. The building looked exactly the same. Worn carpet, fluorescent lights, the comforting smell of old books and industrial cleaner. But Emily felt like a completely different person than the woman who'd left. Her supervisor, Margaret, met her at the reference desk with a hug that surprised them both. Welcome back. We missed you. I missed you too. Emily looked around at the familiar space. Has it been chaos? The usual chaos. Mrs. Henderson still comes in every Tuesday to argue about late fees from 1987. The computers crashed twice. Jerry from IT tried to reorganize the nonfiction section by color, and we had to stage an intervention. Margaret handed Emily a stack of returned books. But we survived. How are you? Emily thought about everything that had happened in 5 weeks. The restaurant humiliation, living with Damien, falling in love, legally separating from her twin sister, becoming a quasi-stepmother to a 6-year-old who thought penguins could skateboard. I'm okay, she said. Better than okay, actually. Good, because we have 3 school groups coming in this afternoon, and the teen reading club needs someone to moderate their book discussion, and you're the only one they don't completely ignore. It felt good to be needed for something she was actually qualified to do. Emily spent the day helping patrons find books, teaching an elderly man how to download ebooks to his tablet, and moderating a surprisingly heated discussion about whether the ending of their assigned reading was deep or just the author giving up. By the time her shift ended at 6, Emily was exhausted in the best way. She walked out to the parking lot where Damien had insisted on having a car pick her up, arguing that the bus route from the library to his house took 90 minutes versus 20 by car, and found Sophie in the back seat. Emily, guess what? Emily climbed in, grinning. What? I lost a tooth. Sophie opened her mouth to display the gap. It fell out during lunch and I saved it for the tooth fairy, but Daddy says the tooth fairy only comes at night, so I have to wait, and it's very hard to wait. That does sound hard. Will you help me write a note to the tooth fairy? Daddy says I should introduce myself in case she doesn't know me yet. Emily glanced at the driver's seat, where Damien was trying not to smile. The tooth fairy needs an introduction? She's very busy, Damien said seriously. It's important to be polite. They spent the drive home with Sophie dictating an elaborate letter about her tooth, her penguin, and her opinion on various vegetables. By the time they pulled into the driveway, Emily had filled 3 pages in Sophie's careful handwriting. Dinner was the usual controlled chaos. Helen had made something complicated with chicken that tasted like heaven. Sophie talked non-stop about the tooth fairy's expected arrival time and whether penguins had baby teeth. Damien looked more relaxed than Emily had seen him in days. After Sophie was in bed, tooth carefully placed under her pillow with the note, Emily found Damien in his office going through contracts. Hey, she said from the doorway. He looked up, smiled. Hey, how was your first day back? Good. Really good, actually. I helped this kid find every book we had about submarines because he's convinced he's going to be a marine biologist. And Mrs. Chen finally figured out how to place holds on the online catalog after 6 months of me trying to explain it. Sounds fulfilling. It is. Emily moved into the office, sat on the edge of his desk. Thank you for the car service. You didn't have to do that. I wanted to. Besides, it gives me an excuse to see you sooner. He set down his pen, pulled her into his lap. I missed you today. You saw me this morning. Still missed you. He kissed her neck, and Emily felt heat pool in her stomach. They'd been taking things slow, but lately, slow was starting to feel like torture. Damien, she said, not quite steady. I think I want. She took a breath. I'm ready for more than just sleeping. He pulled back to look at her, eyes dark. You're sure? Very sure. Emily Carter, are you trying to seduce me in my office? Is it working? His smile was dangerous, extremely. He stood, lifting her with him, and Emily wrapped her legs around his waist. Bedroom, now! They made it as far as the hallway before Damien pressed her against the wall, kissing her like he'd been holding back for weeks, and finally had permission to let go. Emily kissed him back with equal desperation, hands fumbling with his shirt buttons, needing skin contact, needing more. Somehow they made it to his bedroom. Somehow clothes came off between kisses and heated touches and whispered words that Emily would be embarrassed to remember tomorrow, but right now felt perfect. And when Damien finally moved inside her, Emily gasped against his shoulder and thought maybe she understood what all those romance novels were talking about. It wasn't perfect. There was an awkward moment with the condom and another when they bumped heads trying to change positions. But it was real and intense, and afterward, lying tangled in his sheets with her heart still racing, Emily felt more connected to another human being than she ever had in her life. Okay? Damien asked quietly, brushing hair back from her face. Better than okay. Emily traced patterns on his chest. That was, yeah. They lay there in comfortable silence until Emily's stomach growled audibly. Damien laughed. Hungry? Apparently. Helen's chicken was hours ago. Stay here. I'll bring something up. He pulled on sweatpants and disappeared, leaving Emily alone in his bed. She looked around the room properly for the first time. The photo of Sarah still on the dresser, the books on his nightstand, the general organized chaos of someone who had a full life and was trying to fit too much into it. She belonged here. The realization hit her suddenly and certainly, not as a temporary guest or a convenient girlfriend, but as someone who fit into Damien's complicated life because she had her own complications that somehow complemented his. Damien returned with sandwiches and water, climbing back into bed like midnight snacking was completely normal. They ate and talked about nothing important. Sophie's tooth fairy expectations, Emily's submarine-obsessed library patron, whether the Whitmore mansion needed a pool, or if that was excessive even for a billionaire. Sophie's been asking, Damien admitted. Says all her friends have pools. How many friends does she have with pools? Like 2, but in Sophie logic, 2 equals all. He finished his sandwich, watching Emily with an expression she couldn't quite read. Move in with me, officially. Emily froze. What? You're already here. You sleep in my bed, eat at my table, read to my daughter every night. The only difference is you still call the guest room your room and keep half your clothes there like you might need to escape at any moment. He took her hand. I don't want you to feel like you're escaping. I want you to feel like you're home. Damien, I love you, Emily. I know it's fast. I know we've only known each other 6 weeks, but I've spent 3 years not feeling anything, and now I feel everything when I'm with you. So move in, officially. Make this your home too. Emily's eyes were stinging again. She seemed to cry more around Damien than she had in her entire adult life. I don't want to rush things and mess them up. We're already living together. We're already sleeping together. We're already co-parenting Sophie, whether we call it that or not. Moving your stuff from the guest room to here isn't rushing. It's just being honest about what's already happening. He wasn't wrong. Emily had been living in denial, keeping one foot out the door just in case everything fell apart. But what if it didn't fall apart? What if this was actually her life now? Okay, she said quietly. Okay. I'll move in. Officially. Damien's smile was brilliant. He kissed her hard, and the sandwich plates got pushed to the floor, and they spent the rest of the night proving that second times were even better than firsts. The next week was a blur of settling into routines that finally felt permanent. Emily moved her clothes from the guest room to Damien's closet, her 3 outfits looking comically small next to his collection of expensive suits. She brought her books from her apartment, filled 2 shelves in the library, and felt a ridiculous amount of satisfaction seeing her worn paperbacks next to Damien's pristine hardcovers. Rachel came over for coffee and met Sophie, who immediately demanded to know if Rachel liked penguins and whether she thought the tooth fairy was real or just a nice story parents tell. "Definitely real," Rachel said seriously. "I got a whole $1 for my first tooth." $1? Sophie's eyes were huge. "I only got 50 cents. "Inflation," Damien said, not looking up from his laptop. "What's inflation?" "The reason the tooth fairy pays less now than she used to." Sophie looked deeply betrayed. "That's not fair." Watching them banter, Emily felt something settle in her chest. This was her family now, chaotic and imperfect and nothing like she'd imagined her life would look, but hers. Work became a refuge in the best way. Emily threw herself into planning a summer reading program, helping the teen book club prepare for a citywide competition, and teaching computer literacy classes to seniors. Her supervisor asked if she'd be interested in taking on more responsibility, maybe coordinating youth services, which came with a small raise in her own tiny office. Emily said yes before really thinking about whether she had time. When she told Damien that night, he just smiled. "That's amazing, you'll be great at it. It's more hours, more responsibility. I might not be home as early some nights. So we'll adjust. Emily, I don't expect you to structure your life around mine. You have a career. It matters. Do what makes you happy." "You make me happy," Emily said, then felt immediately embarrassed by how sappy it sounded. But Damien just pulled her close. "Good. You make me happy too." 2 weeks later, Claire threw what she called a casual dinner party, which turned out to be code for Meet the Extended Whitmore Family. Emily spent 3 hours being introduced to Damien's mother, Victoria, elegant and sharp-eyed and clearly trying to determine if Emily was a gold digger, his uncle Thomas, who owned half of Chicago's commercial real estate, and various cousins and business associates who all seemed pleasant but evaluating. "Breathe," Damien murmured in her ear during a brief moment alone. "You're doing fine. Your mother hates me." "My mother doesn't trust anyone. Give her time." But Victoria cornered Emily near the end of the evening, and Emily braced for judgment. "You're nothing like I expected," Victoria said, studying Emily with the same dark eyes her son had inherited. "I'm sorry?" "Damien's dated before. Shallow women who wanted his money or his status. You actually care about him, and Sophie. It wasn't quite approval, but it wasn't condemnation either. My son's been half alive since Sarah died. You brought him back, so thank you." Emily didn't know what to say to that. "I'm not trying to replace her." "I know. If you were, I would hate you." Victoria's smile was slight but genuine. "But you're not. You're just being yourself. That's exactly what he needs." It was the closest thing to a blessing Emily was going to get. She'd take it. Life settled into a rhythm that felt almost normal. Emily worked at the library, came home to Sophie's enthusiastic greetings and Damien's quiet presence. They had dinner together every night. Sophie started calling Emily just M instead of her full name, which felt significant even though no one acknowledged it out loud. Weekends were spent at the park or the museum, or just lounging around the house reading while Sophie constructed elaborate adventures for Mr. Waddles. It was good. Better than good. Emily kept waiting for the catch, for the moment when everything fell apart. But weeks passed and disaster didn't strike. Then one afternoon, Emily's phone rang at work. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. "Emily Carter?" A woman's voice, vaguely familiar. "Yes? This is Linda Carter. Your mother." Emily's stomach dropped. She hadn't spoken to her parents in 2 months, not since before the restaurant incident, before Damien, before everything changed. "Hi, Mom. I've been trying to reach you. Your phone's been going to voicemail." Because Emily had been avoiding her parents' calls, knowing they'd want to talk about Sabrina, and Emily wasn't ready for that conversation. "I've been busy. New job responsibilities." "Too busy to talk to your mother?" Linda's voice had that particular edge that meant she was gearing up for a guilt trip. "We've been worried, Emily. Sabrina told us some very concerning things about this man you're living with." Of course she did. The legal agreement prevented Sabrina from contacting Emily, but nothing stopped her from manipulating their parents. "Mom, whatever Sabrina told you..." "She says he's controlling, that he isolated you from your family, that you're not allowed to see your own sister anymore because he doesn't approve." Emily closed her eyes. "That's not true." any of it. Then why haven't you called? Why have you been avoiding us? Because I knew you'd take Sabrina's side. You always do. The words came out sharper than Emily intended. Silence on the other end of the line. That's not fair, Emily.
Isn't it? When has anything with Sabrina ever been fair? She spent our entire lives making mine miserable, and you've never once stopped her. She's your sister.
She blackmailed me, forged my signature on legal documents, set me up to be publicly humiliated. And when I finally stood up for myself, she tried to destroy my relationship with lies to the press. Emily was shaking now, voice rising. So no, Mom, I'm not talking to Sabrina, and if you can't respect that, I'm not talking to you either. She hung up before her mother could respond.
Emily sat at her desk, heart pounding, hands trembling. She'd just hung up on her mother, told off her own parent, set a boundary she'd never had the courage to set before. It felt terrible and liberating in equal measure. That night at dinner, Emily was quiet. Sophie noticed first. Are you sad, Em? A little? Why? Sometimes grown-up stuff is complicated. Oh. Sophie considered this. Mr. Waddles says when things are complicated, you should eat ice cream and think about penguins.
Despite everything, Emily smiled. Mr. Waddles is very wise. After Sophie was in bed, Emily told Damien about the phone call. He listened without interrupting, just holding her hand while she recounted the conversation. You think I overreacted? Emily asked when she finished. No, I think you protected yourself. That's different. She's my mother. Being your mother doesn't give her the right to guilt you for having boundaries. He pulled Emily into his lap. You told me once that being kind isn't the same as being a pushover. Maybe it's time to show your parents that. What if they choose Sabrina? What if I lose my whole family over this? Then they're choosing to lose you, and that's on them, not you. Damien kissed her forehead. But Emily, you have a family, here, with us, and we're not going anywhere. Emily buried her face in his shoulder and let herself cry. For her parents who'd never protected her. For the sister she'd lost before she ever really had her. For the family that could have been if anyone had cared enough to stop Sabrina's poison before it destroyed everything. But also for relief. Because Damien was right, she had a family now. Sophie and Damien and Helen and Claire, and even Victoria with her grudging approval. People who saw Emily for who she was and chose her anyway. The next few weeks were hard. Emily's parents called twice more. She didn't answer. They sent emails that Emily read and deleted without responding. Sabrina, bound by legal agreement not to contact Emily directly, apparently spent her time poisoning their parents against Damien and Emily's relationship. Emily let her. For the first time in her life, she let Sabrina's manipulation happen without trying to fix it, and the freedom was dizzying. Her library position officially changed to Youth Services Coordinator. The pay raise wasn't huge, but it meant Emily could contribute to household expenses, which Damien kept insisting wasn't necessary, but Emily did it anyway because it made her feel less like a dependent and more like a partner. Sophie started first grade. Emily went with Damien to the first day of school orientation and sat through parent meetings about curriculum and classroom expectations. The teacher assumed they were married, and neither of them corrected her. Life wasn't perfect. Damien worked too much. Emily sometimes felt overwhelmed by the size of the world she'd entered. Sophie had nightmares about her mother, and only Emily could calm her down, which felt significant and terrifying. But they figured it out together, day by day, mistake by mistake. Then one October evening, 3 months after the disastrous dinner that started everything, Emily came home from work to find the house unusually quiet. "Hello?" she called. "Outside," Damien's voice came from somewhere beyond the kitchen. Emily walked through the house to the back terrace she rarely used because it was so ridiculously large she felt awkward on it. What she found stopped her in her tracks. The entire space was covered in lights. Not Christmas lights. Something softer, warmer, like captured starlight. There was a table set for two with actual china and wine glasses and candles, and Damien stood in the middle of it all, wearing a suit but looking nervous in a way she'd never seen him. "What is this?" Emily asked. "Dinner, just us. Sophie's at my mother's for the night." "You planned this?" Helen helped, and Claire, and Sophie contributed ideas about what flowers you like. He gestured to the centerpiece, a mix of wildflowers that Emily had mentioned once, months ago, liking at the farmer's market. Emily's throat was tight. This is too much. It's not enough. Damien moved closer. Emily, 6 weeks ago you walked into my life in an ugly dress, pretending to be someone you're not. And somehow you became the realest thing in my world. You're the first person I think about when I wake up. The person I want to tell about my day. The one who makes Sophie laugh and challenges me to be better and doesn't let me hide behind work or money or emotional distance. Damien, but Matt, I'm not done. He reached into his pocket and Emily's heart stopped. I know it's fast. I know we haven't even been together 4 months. I know all the logical reasons to wait. But Emily, I spent 3 years waiting to feel something, waiting to live again. And I'm done waiting. He dropped to one knee and Emily couldn't breathe. I love you, not because you're convenient or because Sophie likes you or because you fit into my life easily. I love you because you're stubborn and kind and you make terrible jokes and you cry during animated movies and you see the best in people even when they don't deserve it. You make me want to be the man you think I am. He opened a small box, revealing a ring that caught the light like captured fire. Marry me, Emily, not someday, not when it's convenient, now. Be my partner, my family, my home. Oh, Emily was crying. When had she started crying? She looked at Damien, this complicated, damaged, beautiful man who'd somehow decided she was worth the risk, and felt her heart make a choice her brain would probably question later. Yes, she whispered. Yes, absolutely yes. Damien's smile was incandescent. He stood, slipped the ring onto her shaking hand, and kissed her like she was air and he'd been drowning. Emily kissed him back through tears and laughter and overwhelming joy. When they finally broke apart, Damien rested his forehead against hers. You're sure? Because there's no takebacks. Once you're a Whitmore, you're stuck with all of us. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Good. He kissed her again, softer. Because I'm never letting you go. They had dinner under the lights, eating food Emily couldn't taste because her heart was too full. Damien told her how he'd been planning this for weeks, how Sophie had insisted Emily would say yes, how even Victoria had approved of the ring choice. Emily couldn't stop staring at the diamond on her finger, couldn't stop smiling. Later, tangled in his bed, Damien traced patterns on her bare shoulder. What are you thinking? He asked. Emily considered lying, saying something romantic or profound, but they'd built this relationship on honesty, even when it was hard. I'm thinking about how 6 months ago I was broke and lonely and trapped in my sister's shadow. And now I'm engaged to a billionaire, and I still can't quite believe this is my life. Is that a good thing? The best thing. She turned to look at him. But Damien, you know I'm still going to be myself, right? I'm not going to suddenly become some polished society wife. I'm going to keep working at the library, keep wearing jeans instead of designer dresses, keep being exactly who I am. I know that's exactly who I want to marry. And you're not going to get bored when the novelty wears off? Damien was quiet for a moment. Then, Emily, I've been bored for 3 years. Nothing about you is boring. You make me feel alive. So no, I'm not going to get bored. I'm going to spend the rest of my life being grateful you said yes. Emily kissed him, trying to convey everything she felt and couldn't say. When they finally fell asleep, her ring caught the moonlight, a promise made real in gold and diamonds. The next morning, they told Sophie over breakfast. Her shriek of joy probably woke the entire neighborhood. Does this mean Emily's going to be my mom? The question hung in the air. Damien looked at Emily, uncertain how to answer. Emily knelt beside Sophie's chair. I'll never replace your mom, Sophie. She was special and she loved you so much. But if you want, I can be your Emily mom. A different kind of mom, but one who loves you just as much. Sophie considered this with her characteristic seriousness. Then she threw her arms around Emily's neck. I want an Emily mom. And just like that, Emily's family grew by one more precious person. She was never the wrong woman. She was exactly who she was supposed to be, in exactly the right place, with exactly the right people, finally. Planning a wedding turned out to be significantly more complicated than getting engaged. Emily had naively assumed they'd have a small ceremony, immediate family, maybe a few friends, something simple and intimate that wouldn't draw attention. Then Claire sat her down with a guest list that had 300 names on it, and Emily realized she'd severely underestimated what marrying into the Whitmore family actually meant. 300 people? Emily stared at the list. I don't even know 300 people. Most of them are business associates, family friends, people Damien has to invite for political reasons. Claire made a note on her tablet. We can trim it down to 250 if we cut out the Chicago Real Estate Development Council, but that might offend Uncle Thomas. I don't want to offend anyone. I just want... Emily stopped, frustrated. I just want to marry Damien without it turning into some massive production. Too late. You're marrying a Whitmore. Massive productions come with the territory. Claire's expression softened. Look, I know this is overwhelming, but Emily, this is your day too. What do you actually want? Emily thought about it. What did she want? Beyond the obvious answer of spending her life with Damien and Sophie, what did the actual wedding matter? I want Sophie to be happy, Emily said slowly. I want Damien to not look stressed, and I want to remember the day without feeling like I was performing for strangers. Okay, we can work with that. Claire started making notes. Small ceremony, bigger reception, immediate family and close friends for the actual vows, then everyone else shows up for dinner and dancing. That way you get your intimate moment, and we still satisfy the social obligations. It was a compromise Emily could live with. They set a date, December, which gave them 2 months to plan, and was probably insane, but Damien insisted he wasn't waiting any longer than necessary. Victoria offered her event planner, who turned out to be a terrifyingly efficient woman named Patricia, who had opinions about everything from napkin folds to whether the string quartet should include a harp. Emily let most of the decisions wash over her, focusing instead on the things that actually mattered. She asked Rachel to be her maid of honor, which made Rachel cry happy tears. Sophie insisted on being both flower girl and ring bearer, because why should boys get the important job? Helen cried when Emily asked her to help choose the menu because someone should represent what we actually like eating instead of what's impressive. The one thing Emily put her foot down about was the dress. Patricia tried to book appointments at exclusive bridal boutiques where gowns started at $10,000. Emily refused. I'm not spending the equivalent of a semester's tuition on something I'll wear once, she told Damien flatly. It's your wedding dress. You should have what you want. What I want is to not feel like a hypocrite. I've spent my whole life being practical. I'm not suddenly going to become someone who thinks designer labels matter just because I'm marrying you. Damien looked at her for a long moment. Then he smiled. You know what? You're right. Wear whatever makes you happy. Show up in jeans if you want. I'm marrying you, not your dress. Emily didn't wear jeans, but she did find a dress at a regular bridal shop for $800 that made her feel beautiful without making her bank account weep. It was simple, elegant, nothing like the elaborate confections Patricia kept showing her in magazines. When Sophie saw it, she declared it very princessy, but not the boring kind, which Emily decided was the highest compliment possible. Work became Emily's refuge from wedding chaos. The library's youth services department was expanding, which meant Emily spent her days hiring new staff, planning programs, and fighting with the city budget committee for adequate funding. It was stressful and demanding, and she loved every minute of it. You're good at this, Margaret told her one afternoon, watching Emily efficiently resolve a conflict between two staff members about programming schedules. The management thing. You should consider applying for the director position when Henderson retires next year. I've only been in this role for 4 months. So, you're already doing half of Henderson's job anyway. Might as well get paid for it. The idea planted itself in Emily's mind. Library director. Her. The girl who'd spent years believing she wasn't good enough for anything beyond basic survival. It seemed impossible and terrifying and maybe, just maybe, achievable. She mentioned it to Damien that night. He was working from home, buried in contracts at the kitchen table, while Sophie did homework beside him. You should do it, he said immediately. I said I was thinking about applying, not that I'd get it. Why wouldn't you get it? Because there are people with more experience, better credentials, actual degrees in library science instead of just what? Being excellent at your job? Making programs that actually work? Getting the city council to increase youth services funding by 15%? Damien looked up from his contract. Emily, you're the most qualified person for that job. Don't talk yourself out of it before you even try. Sophie looked up from her math worksheet. What's Emily applying for? A promotion at work. Is it a big deal? Very big deal, Emily admitted. Sophie considered this. Are you scared? A little. That's okay. Daddy says being scared means something matters. Sophie returned to her homework. You should do it anyway. Out of the mouths of 6-year-olds. Emily looked at Damien, who was trying not to smile. When did you tell her that? Emily asked. When she was scared to start first grade. Apparently she actually listens sometimes. He reached across the table, took Emily's hand. Apply for the job. Worst case, you don't get it, and you're in the same position you're in now. Best case, you become the youngest library director in Chicago. Emily squeezed his hand. Okay, I'll apply. That's my girl. 3 weeks before the wedding, Emily's father called. She'd been avoiding her parents' attempts at contact for months, but something made her answer this time. Emily. His voice sounded older than she remembered. Thank you for picking up. Hi, Dad. Your mother and we've been doing some thinking about everything that happened with Sabrina and with you. Emily's chest tightened. Okay, we were wrong. The words came out rough, like they'd been hard to form. We were wrong to always take Sabrina's side. Wrong to expect you to accommodate her behavior. Wrong to make you feel like protecting yourself was a betrayal of family. Emily couldn't speak. Her father had never apologized for anything in his life. Sabrina came to us last month, he continued, wanted money, said she deserved it because you'd stolen her boyfriend and ruined her reputation. And your mother she finally saw it. The manipulation, the lies, everything you'd been trying to tell us for years. What did you tell her? We told her no. We told her that what happened was her own fault. And we told her she couldn't come back until she got help. Real help. Therapy, not just promises to change. He was quiet for a moment. She didn't take it well. She never does. No. But Emily, we should have protected you from that years ago, decades ago. We failed you as parents, and I'm sorry. Your mother's sorry too, even if she can't quite bring herself to say it yet. Emily's eyes were burning. Why now? Why are you telling me this now? Because Claire sent us an invitation to your wedding, and we don't want to show up without clearing the air first. We don't deserve to be there, but we'd like to be, if you'll have us. Emily looked around the kitchen, at Damien working, at Sophie humming over her homework, at the life she'd built from the wreckage of her old one. She thought about forgiveness, about second chances, about whether blood relationships meant anything when they'd been poisoned for so long. You can come, she said, finally. But Dad, I need you to understand something. Damien and Sophie, they're my family now, my real family. The people who showed up when I needed them. You and Mom, you're welcome in my life, but you don't get to be the center of it anymore. And if you can't respect that, we can. We will. He sounded relieved. Thank you, Emily, for giving us another chance. After they hung up, Emily sat staring at her phone. Damien had stopped working, watching her with concern. You okay? I don't know. My parents apologized, actual apologies, and they asked to come to the wedding. What did you tell them? I said yes. Was that stupid? Damien got up, moved around the table, pulled Emily into his arms. It wasn't stupid. It was generous, which is very you. I don't want to be generous. I want to be angry. They let Sabrina hurt me for 30 years. You can be angry and still give them a chance. Those things aren't mutually exclusive. He kissed the top of her head. But Emily, if they screw up again, we protect you. No more free passes. Agreed? Agreed. Sophie had been listening with the selective attention of children everywhere. Are the mean grandparents coming to the wedding? Emily almost laughed at the designation. They're not mean exactly, just complicated. Mr. Waddles says complicated people need extra snacks and someone to watch them carefully. Mr. Waddles is very wise about human nature. The weeks blurred together. Emily's library director application was submitted. Then she tried not to obsess about it while planning a wedding and managing her current job and preparing to legally become Sophie's stepmother. The paperwork for that alone was complicated. Damien's lawyers handling everything, but Emily insisted on reading every document because she wanted to understand exactly what she was agreeing to. You're going to be her legal guardian if something happens to me, Damien explained, walking her through the custody arrangements. You'll have the same rights as any biological parent. The weight of that responsibility was enormous. Emily looked at Sophie, who was in the living room teaching Mr. Waddles to ice skate on the hardwood floor, and felt her heart squeeze. "What if I'm not good enough?" Emily asked quietly. "What if something happens to you and I screw her up?" "You won't. You don't know that." "Emily." Damien turned her to face him. "You've been Sophie's mother in every way that matters for months now. You're the one she comes to with nightmares, the one she wants to read to her, the one who knows she hates carrots but will eat them if they're mixed into fried rice. You're already her mom. This is just making it legal." Emily signed the papers with shaking hands, feeling the full weight of the commitment. She was a mother now. Not just Damien's fiancée or Sophie's friend, but her actual parent with actual responsibility for this small human's well-being. It was terrifying. It was also the most right thing she'd ever done. The week before the wedding, Emily got a call from the library board. They wanted to interview her for the director position. She had 3 days to prepare a presentation on her vision for the library's future. 3 days? The wedding is in 6 days. Emily looked at Damien in panic. "How am I supposed to prepare a presentation and get married in the same week?" "You're the most organized person I know. You'll figure it out." He was packing for a business trip to New York, 2 days. Unavoidable, terrible timing. "And Emily, breathe. You've got this." "What if I don't?" "Then you don't get the job and we get married anyway and life continues. But you're going to nail it because you're brilliant and you care about libraries more than anyone I've ever met." He left for New York that afternoon. Emily spent the evening working on her presentation, while Sophie helpfully contributed ideas like, "You should have more books about penguins," and "What if the library had a pool?" "Libraries don't have pools, sweetheart." "They should. Swimming and reading are both important." Emily couldn't argue with that logic. The presentation was scheduled for the morning of Damien's return flight. Emily stood in front of the library board, 7 people who held her professional future in their hands, and talked about accessibility, community programming, digital literacy, and why libraries mattered more than ever in an age when information was everywhere but wisdom was scarce. She talked about the submarine-obsessed kid who'd found his passion through books, about Mrs. Chen finally mastering technology, about teenagers who came to the library not because they needed books, but because they needed a safe space where adults treated them like humans. Libraries aren't just about books, Emily concluded. They're about access to information, to opportunity, to dignity. And if I'm given the chance to lead this institution, I'll fight like hell to make sure everyone in this city has that access, regardless of income or education or circumstance. The board thanked her. She wouldn't know their decision until after the wedding. Emily walked out of the building, got in her car, and called Damien. "How did it go?" he asked immediately. "I have no idea. Either really well or I just gave the worst presentation in library board history." "I'm betting on really well." She could hear airport noise in the background. "I'm boarding in 20 minutes. I'll be home tonight." "Good. I miss you." "I miss you too. 2 more days and you're stuck with me forever." "Can't wait." The wedding rehearsal was controlled chaos. Sophie took her dual role as flower girl and ring bearer extremely seriously, practicing her walk down the aisle 17 times until she was satisfied. Emily's parents showed up looking uncomfortable but trying, which was more than Emily had expected. Victoria supervised everything with the efficiency of a military general. Claire got into an argument with Patricia about centerpieces that nearly came to blows. Damien pulled Emily aside during a break in the chaos. "Run away with me," he said. Emily laughed. "We're getting married in 36 hours. Little late to elope?" "I'm serious. We could leave right now, drive to the courthouse, be married by tonight." He was smiling, but there was something genuine underneath. Skip all this performance anxiety and just be married. Sophie would never forgive us. True. She's been planning her flower-throwing technique for weeks. Emily leaned against him, letting his solid presence ground her. 2 more days, then it's just us. Just us, he agreed, and 300 guests at dinner. Minor detail. The wedding day arrived with perfect December weather, cold and crisp with startling blue skies. Emily woke up in the guest room where she'd spent her first night at the Whitmore mansion, tradition dictating that she and Damien sleep separately the night before. Rachel was already there with coffee and bagels, ready to help Emily get ready. "How are you feeling?" Rachel asked. "Terrified, excited, like I might throw up." "That's pretty normal for a wedding day." Claire showed up an hour later with the hair and makeup team.
Victoria arrived with the flowers. Sophie burst in wearing her flower girl dress and immediately started twirling until she got dizzy and crashed into the bed. "I'm so excited I could explode," Sophie announced. "Please don't explode on your dress," Claire said. "It's velvet. Explosion stains are hard to get out."
Getting ready was a blur of activity. Hair styled into something elegant but not too formal. Makeup that made Emily look like herself, but somehow better. The dress that fit perfectly because she'd had 3 fittings, even though she'd tried to argue one was enough. When Emily finally looked in the mirror, she almost didn't recognize herself. Not because she looked different, but because she looked happy. Genuinely, deeply happy in a way she'd never seen in her own reflection before.
"You look beautiful," Rachel said quietly, tears already forming. "Don't cry yet. Save it for the ceremony." "Too late. I'm a mess." Sophie appeared beside Emily, studying her critically. "You look like a princess. The good kind who has adventures and solves problems, not the boring kind who just sits around being pretty." "That's the best compliment I've ever received."
The ceremony was held in the mansion's ballroom, which had been transformed with flowers and lights and enough elegant decoration to make Emily's practical soul wince at the cost. But when she walked down the makeshift aisle on her father's arm, another compromise, letting him give her away even though she was giving herself, none of that mattered. Because Damien was waiting at the front, looking at her like she was the only person in the room. Sophie stood beside him holding the rings with intense concentration. Claire was on Emily's side as maid of honor, grinning. The small group of people who actually mattered were all there, watching. The ceremony itself was a blur. Emily heard herself say the vows they'd written together, promises about partnership and honesty, and building a life that honored both their pasts while creating something new. Damien's voice was steady, but his hands shook slightly when he slid the ring onto her finger. Then they were married, and Damien was kissing her, and Sophie was cheering, and Emily thought this must be what it felt like when broken things finally became whole. The reception was everything Patricia had promised. Elegant dinner, beautiful venue, carefully orchestrated to impress Damien's business associates and social connections. Emily smiled and made conversation with people whose names she'd forget immediately, accepted congratulations from strangers who'd never care about her beyond what marriage to Damien Whitmore meant for their own social standing. But in between the performance, there were real moments. Dancing with Damien while Sophie tried to copy their steps at the edge of the dance floor. Helen crying into her champagne while telling Emily she was the daughter she'd never had. Claire's toast that was half roast, half genuine emotion about watching her brother come back to life. Victoria pulling Emily aside to say simply, "Welcome to the family, actually welcome this time." Even Emily's parents approached during dinner, her mother offering a stiff but genuine apology for years of choosing wrong. Her father squeezing Emily's hand and saying nothing because they both knew words couldn't fix everything, but maybe they could start. Sabrina's absence was conspicuous. A few guests asked about Emily's twin sister, and Emily just smiled and said, "We're not in contact anymore," which was the polite version of, "She tried to destroy my life and I finally protected myself." As the evening wound down and guests started leaving, Emily found herself on the terrace where Damien had proposed. The lights were still up, twinkling against the December darkness. Damien joined her, loosening his tie. "Tired?" he asked. "Exhausted. Happy. Ready for everyone to leave, so it's just us again." Last guest just called their car. Patricia's overseeing the breakdown. "We're officially done performing." He pulled her close. "How does it feel to be Mrs. Whitmore?" "Weird. Good weird, but weird." Emily rested her head on his shoulder. "I keep expecting to wake up and find out this was all some elaborate dream." "It's real. I'm real. This is your life now." "My life. Our life." She looked up at him. "Damien, can I tell you something?" "Always." 6 months ago, I didn't think I deserved to be happy. I thought happiness was for other people. People like Sabrina who took what they wanted, or people like you who'd earned it through success. I thought I was supposed to just survive, keep my head down, make everyone else's lives easier at the expense of my own. And now I think maybe I deserve this. Not because I earned it or because I'm special, but because everyone deserves to be loved, to have a family, to build a life that feels like home." She touched his face. "You taught me that. You and Sophie. You showed me what it looks like when people choose you, not because they have to,
but because they want to. Damien's eyes were bright. You taught me something too. What?
That it's possible to love again, to build something new without erasing what came before. Sarah will always be part of my story, part of Sophie's story. But you're our future, and I'm so grateful you took a chance on us. They stood there on the terrace, the sounds of cleanup distant and unimportant, just being together in the quiet aftermath of their wedding day. Sophie found them eventually, still in her flower girl dress, holding Mr. Waddles. Can I sleep with you guys tonight? She asked. Since we're a real family now? Emily and Damien exchanged glances. So much for wedding night romance. But Sophie looked so hopeful, so happy, so utterly convinced that being a family meant being together. Yeah, sweetheart, Damien said. You can sleep with us tonight. They went upstairs together. Emily still in her wedding dress, Damien in his rumpled tuxedo, Sophie chattering about how the wedding was the best day ever, except maybe also Christmas, and that time we went to the zoo. They all piled into the master bed that was big enough for a family, Sophie in the middle clutching her penguin, and Emily thought this was better than any romantic wedding night scenario. This was real. This was family. This was home. 2 weeks later, Emily got the call from the library board. She'd gotten the job. Director position starting in January, salary that made her gasp because it was more money than she'd ever imagined making. Damien opened champagne to celebrate. Sophie made a congratulations card featuring penguins in business suits. Claire sent a text that just said, "Told you so." Victoria called to say she was proud, which from Victoria was practically a declaration of eternal devotion. Emily's first day as library director was terrifying and exhilarating. She had an actual office with a door that closed, a budget to manage, staff to supervise, programs to develop, and the power to make real change instead of just suggesting it. The first thing she did was greenlight a program for homeless youth to access library services without a permanent address. The second was to fight for extended hours so working parents could bring their kids after dinner. The third was to hire 2 new youth librarians and give them the resources to actually do their jobs well. It was hard work. There were days Emily came home exhausted and overwhelmed, wondering if she'd made a mistake taking on this much responsibility. But then she'd remember the submarine kid who became a marine biology major, Mrs. Chen teaching other seniors how to use email, the teenager who told Emily the library was the only place she felt safe. That was why it mattered. That was why she fought. Life settled into a new rhythm. Emily worked long hours but came home to Damien and Sophie. They had family dinners where Sophie told increasingly elaborate stories about first-grade drama. Weekends were spent at museums or parks, or just lounging around reading. Emily's parents visited occasionally, trying to rebuild a relationship that had been broken for decades. It was awkward and imperfect, but it was something. Rachel got engaged to a guy she'd been dating for 6 months, proving that Emily wasn't the only one who believed in whirlwind romance. Claire started dating one of Damien's business rivals, which led to the most entertaining family dinners Emily had ever witnessed. Victoria grudgingly admitted that Emily was acceptable as a daughter-in-law, which Claire translated to mean, she actually really likes you. Sabrina remained absent, bound by legal agreement, and, according to mutual acquaintances, living in Miami working some new angle Emily didn't care to know about. The silence was a gift Emily had given herself, and she protected it fiercely. One evening in March, almost a year after that disastrous dinner at Luminaire, Emily found herself in the library she now directed, long after everyone had gone home. She walked through the quiet stacks, running her fingers along book spines, thinking about the journey that had brought her here. A year ago, she'd been drowning, trapped in her sister's manipulation, convinced she didn't deserve better, going through life half alive because she'd learned that wanting things only led to disappointment. Now she was married, a mother, a library director making real change in her community, living a life that still sometimes felt too big for the person she used to be. But maybe that was the point. Maybe you didn't grow into the life you wanted. Maybe the life you built helped you grow into who you were supposed to be all along. Her phone buzzed. A text from Damien. "Where are you? Sophie wants to practice her presentation for school and insists she needs both parents there for the full effect." Both parents. Emily smiled at the words, at how casually Damien had started including her in that designation, at how naturally Sophie had accepted her as mom. She texted back, "On my way home." Home.
The word still gave her a small thrill every time she used it. Not the guest room she'd been borrowing, not a temporary shelter. Home. Where she belonged. Where people waited for her not because they needed something from her, but because they wanted her there. Emily locked up the library, drove through Chicago traffic to the mansion that didn't feel intimidating anymore, and walked through the front door to chaos. Sophie had apparently decided her school presentation required costumes, and Damien was trying to figure out how to be a convincing tree while also reading from a script. "Emily, I need you to be the sun," Sophie announced. "The sun doesn't have lines," Damien said, reading over the script. "How is Emily supposed to be the sun? She just has to stand there and be warm and make everything better. That's what suns do." Emily caught Damien's eye. He was trying not to laugh at Sophie's unintentionally perfect description. "I can be the sun," Emily said, dropping her bag and joining the chaos. They spent the evening rehearsing a first-grade presentation about the water cycle that was probably more complicated than it needed to be, but made Sophie happy. Later, after Sophie was in bed and the house was quiet, Emily and Damien sat in the kitchen with tea. Their ritual now, stolen moments of quiet in lives that were often too loud. "She called you Mom today," Damien said. "At school pickup. Introduced you to her teacher as my Mom Emily." Emily's chest tightened. "Yeah? Yeah, I thought you'd want to know." "How do you feel about that?" Damien was quiet for a moment, considering. "I feel grateful. Sarah will always be her first mom, the one she lost too young. But Emily, you're the mom she's growing up with, the one who's here for homework and presentations and all the small moments that make up a childhood. I'm grateful Sophie has you. I'm grateful I have her, both of you." Emily took his hand across the table. "A year ago, I was pretending to be my sister at a restaurant, getting ice water dumped on me by a waiter she'd paid to humiliate me. If someone had told me that disaster would lead to this, to you, to Sophie, to a life I actually want to wake up to, I would have thought they were insane." "Would you do it again, knowing how hard it was?" "Every single part. The humiliation, the fear, the legal battles, cutting off my family, all of it," Emily smiled. "Because it led here. To you being a terrible tree and me being the sun and Sophie thinking that's a perfectly reasonable way to explain the water cycle." Damien laughed, real and genuine and free. A year ago, he'd been a man going through motions, emotionally locked down, convinced his capacity for joy had died with his wife. Now he laughed at his daughter's absurd ideas and kissed his wife over morning coffee and let himself be happy. That was the thing about healing, Emily had learned. It wasn't linear. It wasn't clean. It didn't erase the past or magically fix everything that was broken. But it was possible. You could survive terrible things, manipulation, loss, grief, betrayal, and still build something beautiful on the other side. You could be the wrong woman at a luxury dinner and somehow become exactly the right woman for a billionaire single dad and his daughter who needed someone to choose them as much as they were choosing her. Emily Carter Whitmore, she'd kept both names, unable to completely let go of her old identity while embracing her new one, had learned that worthiness wasn't something you earned through suffering or proved through sacrifice. It was something you claimed by deciding you deserved to exist in the fullness of who you were, flaws and fears and all. Sabrina had tried to teach her that love was transactional, that family was obligation, that being the quiet twin meant accepting whatever scraps of dignity others left behind. But Damien and Sophie had taught her something different, that love was a choice you made every day, that family was built through small moments of showing up, that being quiet didn't mean being invisible. Sometimes it just meant listening carefully enough to know what really mattered. And what mattered was this. The kitchen table conversations at midnight, the terrible tree costumes, the library programs that changed lives, the way Sophie's hand fit in hers, the sound of Damien's breathing as he slept beside her, the terrifying and beautiful responsibility of being someone's mother and wife and partner. Emily had spent 30 years believing she was the supporting character in everyone else's story. Turned out she'd been the protagonist all along. She just needed to find people who saw her that way too. The next morning, Emily woke up before her alarm to Sophie standing beside the bed holding Mr. Waddles and looking concerned. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" Emily asked, immediately on Mom alert. "Nothing's wrong. I just wanted to tell you something." "Okay." Sophie climbed onto the bed, settling between Emily and Damien, who was still half asleep. "I was thinking about my real mom, the one who died.
Emily's heart clenched. She glanced at Damien, who was now fully awake and watching his daughter carefully. "What about her?" Damien asked gently.
"I think she would like Emily. I think she would be happy I have an Emily mom now."
Sophie looked between them seriously. "Because Emily mom reads to me and helps with homework and makes you smile, Daddy. And real mom wanted us to be happy. So I think she'd be glad." Damien's eyes were suspiciously bright. Emily's throat was too tight to speak. They just held Sophie between them, this small human with her enormous heart and her ability to find peace with impossible things. "I think you're right," Damien finally managed. "I think she would be very glad." "Okay, good, because I was worried about it." Sophie hopped off the bed, crisis resolved. "Can we have pancakes for breakfast?" "Pancakes for breakfast," Emily confirmed, voice rough. After Sophie thundered downstairs, Emily and Damien lay there in the morning quiet. "She's going to be okay," Emily said, "despite everything. She's going to be okay. Because of you. Because of us. All of us. We're figuring it out together." And they were. Imperfectly, messily, with mistakes and doubts and moments when Emily still wondered if she was good enough for this life she'd stumbled into. But together. That was the point. You didn't have to be perfect to deserve love. You didn't have to have all the answers to build a family. You just had to show up, keep trying, and trust that the people you chose would catch you when you fell. Emily Carter had spent her whole life being the wrong woman, wrong twin, wrong daughter, wrong victim, who should have fought back harder. But in Damien Whitmore's kitchen, teaching Sophie about library science while Damien made pancakes and argued about whether penguins could be librarians, Emily was finally, perfectly, completely the right woman. Not because she'd transformed into someone different, but because she'd found people who loved her exactly as she was, messy and scared and still figuring things out. And that made all the difference.